Good evening. This is the March 12th, 2019 meeting of the East Long Meadow Town Council. We'll begin the meeting now with a Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For a moment of silence, we ask that you keep our servicemen and women around the globe, as well as our first responders, and a longtime former employee, Robert Adams, who recently passed away. His 40-plus years of service to the town as a deputy DPW supervisor is duly noted, and we're grateful for the years of service that he's given us. In accordance with Mass General Law, this meeting is being taped, and I am required to ask if there's anyone else in the audience who is video or audio taping this meeting. Please identify yourself. Seeing none, we can move on. Under public comments, Mr. Florence, we have no one registered. Okay. Council comments. Anybody who wishes to make a comment this evening? Okay, well, Denise, you're on deck. Town Manager's Report. Batter up.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I apologize for missing the workshop last week. I understand that it was a success. And under Financial Matters section, we can discuss whether we need another workshop next week after we hear, after we go through some of the things tonight. Congratulations to Sergeant James Gagnon, who was recently promoted from patrolman after passing the sergeant's exam. Sergeant vacancy was due to the departure of Sergeant Joseph D'Alessio. We've received certification that East Long Meadows Chapter 90 apportionment for fiscal 2020 is $581,366. The current year's apportionment was $580,792 with a supplemental $116,000 added in October. So we're going to pray for an added appropriation in October this year as well. The 125th Anniversary Celebration Committee pasta and chicken dinner was a great success. I saw quite a few of you there. It was, I think the police chief had an estimate of like 140 people approximately. So that was a great night. Prior to Tuesday's meeting, I'll provide updated information, which I sent you all today, about the outstanding developers bonds. And to your credit, Councilman Anderson, it has kick-started a lot of action with those items. You saw the letters that went out, and in Connie's memo, she told the developers that they needed to contact her and Bruce by, I think it's April 30th. So there's deadlines coming up, and some of those are quite old. I think one was 2000. So that's a long time standing, and good to have gotten that started. Thank you. So you've received that under separate cover. I only got one of the pieces this morning. That's why I sent it today. I attended another Veterans District meeting in Munson last week to work on defining hours per week per community and a job description for the district's Veteran Service Officer. The meeting was a great start toward defining the communities plural, served by the district expectation of the VSO. There has been, and unfortunately, I'm the questioner of the group because I'm the new guy, but there's been no definition of what the VSO is supposed to be doing for us, Veteran Service Officer is supposed to be doing for us. He has 4 defined hours here. So I said, if we pay 50% of the bill, does that mean that the other 3 communities split another 4 hours? Or, and I was told today that no, he actually works 25 hours. So I'm wondering how that's all working. So we're looking at things like the formula that's used to bill us, give us our portion. We have over 900 veterans in town, and I've seen payments for about 20. So I think we have a bigger population that can be served. And this is the beginning of how we get that outreach out. We've talked about possibly having like a veterans hour once a month where the veterans officer just is here for coffee in the morning or something, or lunch, or some different ideas on outreach. And the group that we're working with is pretty on board for doing that. The council president and the fire chief and I attended Western Mass Fire Chiefs Association's annual legislative breakfast. I've attached a portion of the program that highlights the legislation that they're really highlighting, and it was pretty interesting to hear why they had those priorities. They were very different than the priorities they had last year, so it was a good meeting as well. That's really all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Madam President,
yes.
If I may just add, just to throw a thought in with the Veteran Service Officer. When we were at the MMA conference in January, I spoke to a few people from Long Meadow, Board of Selectmen members, and their Veteran Service Officer is being underutilized there just because they don't have, enough, I guess, for him to do on a full week basis. And they were, at least the two I talked to, were very amenable to possibly sharing if we got to that point.
I'll talk to the town manager.
So just keep that in your,
Yeah. Oh, no, that's very interesting, because I shied away from that because they have a full-time officer, and I thought he she must be being used full-time, so there would be no sharing to do. But if they feel that person is being underutilized, we could take the other half of that time. That's I will definitely reach out on that. Yeah, thank you.
Look who showed up.
not just a pretty face.
Tax season and all.
Thanks, Paul.
Any other follow-up to Denise's report? Okay, moving on to item 6 on the agenda, approval of minutes. First, we have the February 26, 2019 open session minutes. They're in your packet. Hopefully you've had a chance prior to now to look them over, and if there are any corrections or additions. We'll hear that now from anyone. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the February 26th regular session minutes.
I'll second that. So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of approving the February 26th minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Those opposed, please say nay. And any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. The March 4th, 2019 budget workshop session minutes, they are also in your packet. If you have any additions, deletions, please, you can offer those now. If not, I will entertain a motion to accept the March 4th minutes.
I'll move that.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of approving the March 4th budget workshop minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. And are there any abstentions?
One.
2 abstentions. Thank you. Item 7, communication, correspondence, and announcements. Any counselor have anything to add there? Mr. Florence, no other? Okay, other than that, then we can move to the Veterans Memorial presentation. Mr. Gusco, how are you?
Thank you. Very well. Good evening. Our Veterans Memorial Committee wish to thank the Town Council for adding us to their agenda this evening. The last time our committee was before you, we presented our plan to construct a Veterans Memorial in the front of the Senior Center. And we provided the preliminary dimensions needed for the memorial, which you generously gave to us. Our committee has worked diligently with a local architect from East Longmeadow to conceptualize, design, and illustrate the photo that you previously received, which was also accompanied by a narrative of the memorial. As you can see, our target now is to utilize the complete tract of land in the front of the Senior Center. The approximate cost of this design has been estimated at $475,000. And that's based on the design and also by the submission of a local contractor. Since receiving our nonprofit status and our certificate of solicitation from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, which is an annual requirement to raise money in the state of Massachusetts, we have already had 2 fundraisers, and we have a third planned for April the 5th at the Springfield Elks 61, which you received and which was attached to the previous flyer I gave you. The tickets can be purchased from any committee member. They can be purchased here at the Senior Center. And we have printed 280 tickets, of which most of them are already sold out. I doubt if we have even 20 left.
Wow.
And so it's going to be a great time. And as the flyer previously indicated, there are 3 local performers, outstanding performers, who are going to perform at this function. And they are all donating their time to this event. Our committee has constantly been receiving monetary donations from many sources. We also have written several grants and donation requests for money. Likewise, we have met with representatives from Senator Eric Lesser's office and representatives from Brian Ash and Angela Pupilo's office. And we requested money from the state legislature in the upcoming budget. And we received a favorable accommodation from those people. And I think we're going to get some money from them. So we're hoping to anyway. We've also submitted correspondence to Congressman Richard Neal in hopes that there may be some monetary funds available from the federal government. I don't know how that'll play out though. Additionally, committee members have been visiting East Longmeadow business owners and giving them complete information packages on the memorial and specifying how and when and where they can donate their money. As well, we are working with the director of the ERC Chamber of Commerce in East Longmeadow. In considering this model of the memorial, therefore, our Veterans Committee has respectively asked the committee and the Town Council to occupy the complete frontage for the construction of this memorial, and that's why I'm here tonight. The DPW director has already informed the committee there are no restrictions in that vein other than the sprinkler system, which would have to be renovated and situated anyway. And the zoning determination application I already submitted to the building commissioner, and he has signed off on that already. And now we are scheduled to meet with the architect on Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning so we can develop a site plan and go forward and hopefully appear on the agenda of the planning board in April. So, thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
It's all
So
good
we-
news,
Yep.
especially the sense from the state and maybe the federal government that there might be some funds to assist with the cost. That's very heartening.
And I wasn't embarrassed to ask us for $100,000.
No, you shouldn't
Okay.
be.
I
In Washington, that's little money.
did. Yeah, I know it is. So, thank you very kindly.
Thank you very much for all your work.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is a
Look
great
forward to another update.
Great
Well,
committee.
this is not a daunting task. Every veteran on this committee is passionately committed, and we hope it takes effect no later than 2021.
Well, your enthusiasm, as well as your committee members, when I've been present for some of your other fundraisers, is very obvious to see how invested they are in this project, and it's all good for the town of East Long Meadow and the
Well, if you need
veterans.
tickets, buy them. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Under item 8, orders of the day, licensing matters. Approval of an annual entertainment license for the Apple Place. Petitioners here.
You want me to?
Absolutely, please.
Did you bring any ice cream?
Did you bring samples? No.
Joe, she'll put you on the list and send you some. She'll mail it. She'll mail it.
You mail them?
Try ice.
Kidding.
No, just mail it.
Would you just identify yourself by name and address, and
Yep.
if you want to give us any background
Yep.
information?
Cindy Normandin, 540 Summers Road, East Long Meadow. I own the Apple Place, and it's a bakery and an ice cream shop. It's a farm, and it's been an apple farm for many, many years. We had a corn maze for the last couple of years, and it's kind of turned into a place, I think, where town people like to go. So we're looking to have an entertainment license just to do some acoustic music, library events. She's like the event person.
I help her to coordinate the events that we have at the Apple Place. The library has really taken advantage of the space, and we have story time there, and there's
We want to do puppet
there's
shows.
so
and
many things that happen there.
different things like that.
Just to, for the record, would you also identify yourself and address?
Sure, Adriana Yakabuchi, and it's 101 Fernwood Drive in East
Thank
Long
you.
Meadow.
I noticed that, yes, you work with the library, the rec.
Mm-hmm.
Don't overlook the schools, because that would be a cool place to maybe do some field trips for the younger ones.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd like to, high school kids, there's a lot of talented kids in East Long Meadow, and they can't sing or play out or whatever at bars, of course. So
That's a perfect, exactly.
it's,
So you've
it's,
got-
I hope not, but, but, I mean,
have
her
access to
kids,
so
she
many
has 4
local-
kids,
yeah,
so she
right.
has access to a lot of kids.
We have access to so many local musicians that are just ready and wanting to play, and so giving them an hour or two to play right by the creamery without any amplification, maybe just a small microphone, to the crowd of individuals that's there. Seems like a
Yeah.
really empowering opportunity for them
And
to
we
start.
close at 9 during the peak season, so it would be no later than 8:30.
Any other questions from the council? If seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the entertainment license.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the entertainment license for the Apple Place. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. Your
Thank
motion
you.
passes. Good luck with it. It
Thank
sounds
you.
like a very
We're opening April
Family-friendly,
30th. if you want.
community-friendly event, all good things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask one question before they leave, please? Is this your first time having this license? I really don't remember.
Yes.
If you did this last year, or?
No,
Okay,
this is
I
our
thought it
first
was the
time.
first time, so.
Yeah.
That's it, good luck.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
The next item is a one-day liquor license for St. Paul the Apostle Church for a pasta dinner on March 23rd. Is someone here from the applicant here? Any discussion from the council? This is an applicant who is frequently before us, so as long as they've met all the conditions, I don't have a problem with moving forward on it. So, that said, can one of you make a motion to approve that license, please?
I'll make a motion to approve a one-day liquor license for St. Mark's Church for a quarter.
No,
No,
St.
that's
Paul's.
the first one. St. Paul the Apostle Church for a pasta fundraising dinner on March 23rd from 4 to 10 p.m.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of approving a one-day liquor license?
Quick comment, this is a non-for-profit, obviously the church is, so is this also asking for a waiver?
No,
of
because
the-
they're using it for a
They are
building
using it. Okay,
project.
so it is that. Okay, I want to be clear. Okay, thank you.
All those in favor of approving the one-day license for St. Paul the Apostle, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. That license is approved. And finally, a one-day liquor license for St. Mark's Episcopal Church for a quarter auction fundraiser on March the 23rd as well. Lots going on in town that night. Someone here from St. Mark's? There too, they have been before us on some occasions to advocate for various events, so they've met all of the requirements for the license application. So that said, I'll entertain a motion to approve a one-day liquor license for St. Mark's.
So I'll ask for a motion to approve a one-day liquor license for St. Mark's Episcopal Church for a quarter auction fundraiser on March 23rd of 2019 from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve a one-day liquor license for St. Mark's Church for March 23rd. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. That that license is approved as well. Lots of good things happening. Item 4 under licensing matters, discussion of a fortune teller's license per the Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 1851. That is in your packet as well. Mr. Florence, can you give us some background on that? Or is the individual here this evening? Would you mind coming up to the microphone and identifying yourself? And
I'm sorry, Kaz, 185I.
oh, I'm sorry, did I say that wrong?
Yeah.
185I. Oh, yes, look at that font. Good evening, could you identify yourself, please?
My name is Donna Utter, resident of East Long Meadow. I was just questioning that I applied or tried to apply for this license a number of years ago and was basically turned down. And I have just questioned if this could be done again. And that it is actually I was told it's being done in town without licenses.
To that comment, I don't have any knowledge of that I can offer, but I'll ask Mr. Florence.
I don't know of that either.
Okay,
But I know
so-
in this situation, we will have to accept this.
Right.
Yeah.
So were that be the case, because we have, this is a bylaw, correct? Or are you quoting from MGL? This is MGL.
It's
Okay.
Mass
Yeah,
General
yes.
Law. Right.
So that said, for the benefit of the audience as well as the viewers, Section 185I, no person shall tell fortunes for money unless a license therefore has been issued by the local licensing authority. Said license shall be granted only to applicants who have resided continuously in the city or town in which the license is sought for at least 12 months immediately preceding the date of the application. No such license shall be transferred or assigned unless otherwise established in a town-by-town meeting action and in a city-by-city council action and in a town with no town meeting by town council action by adoption of appropriate bylaws and ordinances to set such fees. The fee for such license granted under this section shall be $2, but in no event shall any fee be greater than $50. Whoever tells fortunes for money unless licensed under this section shall be punished by a fine of not more than $100. So that said, Mr. Florence, we have a licensing matters subcommittee who could review this.
That's correct.
Do we also need a bylaw?
Yeah.
As well, so
Right.
then perhaps the bylaw committee and the licensing matters subcommittee can get together on this?
Or maybe
And-
would the bylaw need to be created first?
The bylaw has to be created first before we could issue a license. So, ma'am, to that end, the process will go something like this. The matter will get referred to our bylaw subcommittee. the text of a bylaw has to get approved first by the council, and then there needs to be subsequent public hearings for it. Once that is legally in place and adopted by the town, then the matter can be referred to our licensing matters subcommittee for their review. Since it's a license for fortune telling is protected under Mass General Law, I can't imagine that there would be any objection by the licensing subcommittee. However, they will have to attach a dollar amount to the application. I believe this falls under an entertainment license, Mr. Florence, or we can create a separate category.
I would think it'd be an entertainment.
Okay, so if it falls under entertainment, our current fee structure for entertainment license, if I'm thinking this correctly, is $75. However, the law says up to 50, so I don't want to put words in the mouth of the subcommittee, but it's likely that they'll go to the maximum allowed by the statute. So all that said, I would say 3 months or so. You know, I'm just trying to ballpark that, but it's a process that takes time because it has to be vetted in public. Excuse me. But unless other counselors want to weigh in, I don't.
I have a couple of questions.
The opportunity to have that kind of license is protected by the statute. So, but certainly.
Through the chair, how long ago was it when you applied for the license?
I want to say it was maybe about 8 years ago.
8 years ago. And do you happen to recall the reason it was denied at that point in time?
Because I refused to be interviewed of my talents and other issues. And I said that was not part of the bylaw, the Massachusetts law.
Okay.
And I was told I had to. And I said no. And I checked with Massachusetts attorney and was told no, I did not have to be interviewed. And I did check around to other towns that do have this license.
Thank you.
I will explain. All I wanted, when I took the classes, I took them at the Springfield Museum. The instructor, first thing out of her mouth was never, ever read cards for money unless you have a license. I wanted to be able to read cards for like charity, something that's fun to do and raise money for charity, nothing else. But I needed the license. And the town, the selectman, I was interviewed over the phone and was told I had to be interviewed by the selectman. And I said, no, that's not part of the law. So I let it drop.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because I was on the board 8 years ago and I don't remember hearing anything about that, so whoever told you that never bothered telling us that.
It was a selectman.
Okay, that narrows it down.
And you can understand why I said...
fortune tellers, but you can figure it out.
And you can understand why I said no.
Okay.
And I was asked personal questions that I didn't think were appropriate.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it was in the cards.
Oh boy.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Through the
What
chair.
is the procedure for somebody that is reading cards now for money in town?
That they'd have to have a license.
I was going to
But-
suggest that maybe you come see me. and
Right. We can go over some of
can
that. Yeah.
figure out
Okay,
what you're talking about without, you don't need to do
thank
it
you.
now.
Okay.
But
I
in the
just-
meantime, this will get furthered
Oh,
on to our
understand,
subcommittees.
and I appreciate it. I didn't expect that I was going to have to say anything tonight.
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, it is for sure.
Any other questions?
Question.
Yes.
Are you planning on, if you get this license, opening up a storefront? No. So let me see if I understand. So really what you're doing is trying to raise money, not for yourself, not one dime for yourself.
Not
You
right.
want to do this strictly as a fundraiser for recognized charities in this community. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm almost thinking this is almost analogous to having a casino night type thing.
Yeah, it
Almost.
still falls under
It
entertainment.
falls under entertainment because you're not you're doing this, and it's very clear this is for entertainment purposes only, correct? and you're not running a business, you're not going to be applying through Mr. Florence to get a business license through the town.
No.
I think it's a pretty simple solution. I think we just treat it along the lines, because you're only doing this, you're not going to be filing, printing business cards. You're doing this for fun, for entertainment, to raise money for recognized causes, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
And
I
at the
think there's
top-
an easy solution to this without having to do this stuff.
Well.
Unless there are businesses out there.
There are businesses in town.
Well, that's that conversation
Yeah.
that you'll follow up, I'm sure.
I don't know exactly how
And I know,
to do it. but-
Councilor O'Connor has the law, the state law, and it is a licensed process, so
You-
there is a process to go through.
So if you're doing it for just like, having a casino night where no one's making money as up for the cause, you don't have, we don't allow casinos in East Long Meadow, but you can have for entertainment purposes, casino night, correct? We've had that. So is this along that same line, is what I'm wondering.
They specifically
Well, the Mass
mention
General
this,
law is pretty specific, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fortune teller's license specifically mentioned on the Mass General law, so.
Yeah, but it suggests no shall collect money. If
Shall
all the
tell
money
fortunes
is
from
going to the charity and she's not collecting it, then I think there's a distinction
There's a
there.
line there. but-
Yeah.
I mean,
Then
we could-
that's what the licensing
Then that's her
committee-
situation. Other
That's
people
right.
may want to do it as a
As a
business, in which
profit.
case, we're
We don't.
unable to
Might as well be proactive.
address
Doesn't
that
hurt to
currently,
address it,
so
yeah.
might as well take it to the process.
That's right. Okay, well, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This will go
Thank
through
you.
our process. Thank you. Moving on to 8B, financial matters. We have under B1, an explanation of assessments, and with us this evening, we have our Director of Assessor's Office, Diane Bishop.
This is
Good evening.
Hello.
I'm here this evening because I was asked to give a little micro mini course 101 on assessing and how assessments were derived. And I know that several of our town councilors had contacted me over the tax season, and they were asking questions because they were getting them from tax payers. And so I believe that a presentation here at the town council meeting will help assist both our all of our councilors, and maybe reach a wider audience and be able to help the taxpayers understand. So when I thought about how is best to start off, I thought the most common questions or statements that walk into my office are probably even statements that you have heard. And in the 25 years I've been doing assessing, I've heard them in every municipality that I've worked in. First question that always comes up when someone gets their tax bill is they say, I haven't done anything to my house. Why'd my assessment go up? Or, why did you inspect my house? Did you inspect my neighbors' houses? Why was my assessment value not on my tax bill? Why did my house go up more than the average household? And two statements that I hear all the time is, you just raised assessments to bring more money in for the town, or I heard my taxes can't go up any more than 2.5% by law. So hopefully I'm going to cover all of those within a very brief period of time, and if anyone has questions, please feel free to stop. So the first part of it is the collection of the data. There are many components to determining an individual assessment of a certain property, and then there's also many components when you're doing a mass appraisal. And in our assessing world, we have to do both. The first key item is to ensure we have the correct data on an individual house. Please know that our property record cards are online at our town website, which is www.eastlongmeadowma.gov under property information. So to start, many years ago, a team of data collectors went out from scratch and picked up every single improved property in this town. And since then, we are building upon, on a regular basis, all of the information that goes on these property record cards. The information that was collected is both interior and exterior features of the property and exterior measurements of the house. There are several different types of inspections that occur over the course of the year, and they would be building permit inspections, cyclical inspections, and sales inspections. So for building permits, anytime we have an active building permit on file, we will send a representative from our office to come out to the property to pick up any new construction or improvements to the property. Cyclical inspections is a requirement by the Department of Revenue, the Bureau of Local Assessments, where we have to complete a 10-year re-inspection program of every property in town. And these inspections may find some improvements which could possibly increase your value, or it could find some deferred maintenance which possibly could decrease your value, all depending on the condition of your home at that time. And then sales inspections, where we have to look at the current sales, and those sales is what we use for our statistical analysis. So it's only wise to make sure that we have the proper, accurate information on the sale properties before we start to use them, as they're the ones that drive the market. Generally, when you do any improvement to your property, you should take out a building permit, but there are occasions where we find that we'll go out to a property and a building permit may not have been taken out, or we may not have received the building permit. But once we discover that there's an improvement to the property, we do have to pick that up and begin assessing it. So each year, our data collections must be complete by June 30th, as our new fiscal year starts on July 1st, and that is what will take effect for that new fiscal year. Once our data's been updated and complete, we move on to the mass appraisal process. So first we were doing individual properties, and now we're looking at the town as a whole. So each year the town must have their values, also known as assessments, certified by the Mass Commissioner of Revenue. We have to look at arm's length sales. So this is a sale that a willing buyer and a willing seller under no duress has bought and sold this property. And we need to look at the level and the uniformity of the existing assessment. So if you have a sale price and you have an assessment, it needs to fall within an acceptable range which was set out by the Commissioner of Revenue. There's a high and a low, and we must meet an acceptable range. This is done by reviewing the assessment to sale ratios. We need to find a median, and we need to be aware that our values must be at 100% of what the market is. This past year, when we did the analysis for fiscal 2019, the assessor saw that the ASR, or the assessment to sale ratio, was dropping below the acceptable range, and we did have to increase, on average, 6% on all single-family homes. Now, when I say single-family, because that's our largest class, I'm really focusing in on that, but all classes of property increased, but most single-family homes did increase approximately 6%. The Bureau of Local Assessments review these LA3 sales reports, which is where the assessment to sale ratios come from, and they have to approve all of our statistical analysis based on these. The town's FY19 values were approved late September of 2018, which was 3 months after the fiscal year began, and our tax rate was approved early November, about 5 months into the fiscal year. So if I go back to some of those questions that we started out with, which I believe a lot of people have a little bit of a misconception, I haven't done anything to my house. Why did my assessment go up? Although they may not have done anything to their house, we might have been missing some information that was picked up during an inspection, so that could have changed the assessment. They could have had a building permit that we visited and we updated. That could change the assessment. Or maybe their card did not change one bit, but due to the assessment to sale ratios, our values had to increase or decrease in order to meet the acceptable range. So sometimes someone doesn't have to do anything to their house. It's just based on what the market is driving in East Longmeadow. A lot of people look at us and say, why did you visit my house? How'd you pick me? And a lot of times they don't realize they had an active building permit. Now, the building inspector's already been out to their house like 8 months ago. Their remodel is finished, and so they forget that that's, in our case, still active, even though they're all complete. But we have certain periods of time that we can pick up information and then apply it to our assessing rules. Or your house hadn't been inspected in the last 10 years. I do run reports and see what houses we have not been to. If I haven't been out for a building permit or a sales inspection, you're probably due for a cyclical inspection. Or if you did just purchase the house, that would be a reason that we went out. A lot of people get confused why their assessed value isn't on their tax bill. And in 2013, we voted to have quarterly tax billing. So our first 2 bills that come out each year is a preliminary bill. It does not have tax rate, and it does not have values on it. And once the tax rate is set and the values are set, which we just discussed was 3 and 5 months into the fiscal year, when people get their actual tax bills, all that information should be on there. Another common misconception is when people get their 3rd quarter tax bill, they look at that new payment and they multiply it times 4 and they try to determine how much their taxes went up, and it's usually much higher than what actually happened. If somebody is trying to determine how much their taxes went up, they really need to look at last year's taxes and this year's taxes and just determine that, because the first 2 months is only 1/2 of whatever you paid last year. If you had increases for any reasons, you're really making it up in the last 2 installments because of the way our tax rolls, tax payments go. Why did my house go up more than the average? Why didn't my next door neighbor or my friend down the street? Again, if there was a building permit, a cyclical inspection, which picked up something, your house may have gone up where somebody else's may not have. But for a overall assessments, if everyone went up 6%, everyone went up. But people will come in and say, but my neighbors went down. Well, your neighbors may have had deferred maintenance on their house, which was obvious from the 10 years prior to visiting. Your neighbors might have taken their in-ground swimming pool out, demoed it, filled it in, and their property value is going to decrease based on that. So it's really hard to pick and choose when they're looking at a sheet saying one person went up, one person went down. But there's generally a good reason, and by stopping into the assessor's office, we can generally give them that reason. 2 statements that come up. You raise the assessments just to bring more money into the town. And I know that I gave to Tom, I have this sheet. This is how the tax rate is determined. It is posted on my website. I have been putting it there for the last 8 years. And I have asked LCAT to put this into part of this broadcast. But what I tried to explain to people is back in May, the legislative body, which is our town council, determined what a budget will be for the town. And they try their best to work what money is going to be raised from taxation and other sources. And then on the right-hand side of this display, it gives you the assessor's role. Well, while the town council is working on their part, the assessors are trying to determine where our values are going to be going, whether up or down, depending on the time of, depending on what the economy is giving us. And when we're looking at this, we basically find that we need to take the total amount of money raised by taxation and divide it by the total assessments. and multiplying it times 1,000 gives us our tax rate. So one thing that I do like people to be aware of is the amount that was raised by taxation was well below what our levy limit was. So that brings me into my last one. I heard you could not raise my taxes any more than 2.5%. So back in the very early 80s when Prop 2.5 went into effect, the 2.5 sticks in everyone's minds, but they don't really relate how that 2.5 affects their overall taxation. And so my last presentation that I had given to Tom was our actual levy limit sheet, which is put out by the state. It's always returned to us. The top portion, section 1, is always filled out, and it shows us that in letter E, FY18 subtotal, that was our levy limit from last year. We can raise that levy limit by 2.5%. That's where the Prop 2.5 comes in. So if the town raised everything identical by 2.5% and our values didn't change, people would see no more than a 2.5% increase. But unfortunately, this person's value went up because they did building, and this piece of property may have became tax exempt, and this property was declined in value due to deferred maintenance. So the values shift, but the town cannot raise any more than 2.5%. So that's what I had prepared. I don't know if that touched on those items that the town council had questions on. I always tell people, our office, we have an open door. Well, it's really closed, but people are welcome to come in at all times. We love to be able to give explanations to people. We like to guide them. People are not always happy when they have their tax bill, but if they at least have an understanding of how their value was, and to see that they are fair and equitably assessed, even though none of us like paying taxes, it is a way of life, but we're there to help anyone along the way if they have any needs or understandings. Questions?
A couple, whether it's urban legends or not, maybe it's just worth throwing out there, because I get these questions, so I figured I'll throw it out to you.
Okay.
As we know, the fiscal year starts July 1 and ends June 30th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it true that the town sends the tax bill to the assessed owner on January 1st of the calendar year, or is there a different benchmark the town uses to send? Let's say hypothetically someone buys a house now, all right, and they wonder why they didn't get their tax bill. Again, this might be a collector's office question. I don't know, but I'll throw it out there. Even though, you know, the fiscal year started a few months later, do you happen to know any, you know, either Tom or you, how they determine which individual gets the tax bill for the start of that next fiscal year?
Well, we're very fortunate with our software that we purchased back in 2013. It has what they call a future owner module, and our Munis system works great with that. So we can put all of our new owners as of January 1 of a given year through December 31st, we'll always send it to the newest owner. But by law, it has to have the assessed owner's name as of January 1. So on our tax bill, we have one area that says assessed owner as of January 1 with one name, and then we have a mailing address with the new name and where they've requested their tax bills to be mailed. So can't say that for every community, but I know for our community that we have resolved that.
Good, so they're both right. Then the second part of the question is, someone feels the tax is, you know, the assessment is wrong. And is there an allowable mistake factor? And again, the urban legend is it's 10%. That if there's a 10% mistake, it goes to the town, not to the petitioner trying to get that. Again, I'm just talking about urban legends.
I guess I haven't heard that urban
Oh,
legend yet.
I heard it. Oh, yeah, 10%. If you're within 10%, not even worth the aggravation because the town's going to win. I want to. Okay.
So since I have been here, and I'm sure that even prior to me being here, Our main goal is to make sure that our information is accurate. So if I was asked to do an abatement, or you did an abatement, and I went out to your house and we found that you didn't have a fireplace and it affected you by $3,000 in value, I would want to address that because I want to correct my data and I want to make sure that things are accurate. If you said to the town, well, I paid $300 for my property and you're assessing me for $302 and I want it to be, we probably would say you are within the range, because you have to keep in mind we do medians, we don't do an individual appraisal to assess, we do mass appraisal.
Is that range 10%?
The range for the acceptable ranges
plus or minus,
is we should not be below 90% of the fair market value or over 10%, but that's mass appraisal, not an individual appraisal. So if your mass appraisal is, our town tries to get about 95% of the market rather than the 100%. You just, if you had a cookie cutter community and every house was identical, we could do 100% market. But because we have all different style homes, we have some that just sell really high. I have no idea why. I think it must be, you know, a person who has disposable income and they can afford that. And then the next one will sell so low and I go, I don't get what happened. I might not know the personal details of maybe someone was trying to get out from under some debt, but we do our best to have, to do it fair and equitable.
Other questions from the council?
Just a quick statement.
Sure.
I've had to refer a couple people over, and thank you for patiently dealing with them. I've got positive feedback on both the people.
Oh, good.
One I spoke to you about, and I'm sure it is difficult at times when people first get that. It's a little bit of a shock factor, but you must have done a pretty good job explaining it to them, because they both gave me positive feedback about your office.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for providing that for us tonight.
Okay, so assessing in 20 minutes.
It's not quite that easy.
Thank you very much.
Great job.
The next item on our agenda under financial matters is the joint meeting of the Town Council and the East Long Meadow School Committee for the Charter, Article 6, Section 1, regarding the annual budget process. And we have our school representatives here this evening.
President Hill, I need to open.
You need to open your meeting, yes.
So this time I'll call to order the school committee meeting of March 12th, 2019. We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of opening? Aye. We are open. Thank you to President Hill. And we're going to hand out the budget sheets here for everybody.
Okay. Well, while Mr. Smith is doing that, as you know, this is a requirement written into the charter so that the schools, as well as the council, have this joint meeting. It's analogous to a kickoff for the budget season, I suppose, to talk about the parameters of the budget, as well as some projections that our Finance Director, Sarah Menard, can provide this evening. So that said, Sarah, do you want to, would you be able to do that for us?
No, I have where we are today in our current budget.
Okay.
That's what the.
Fair enough.
You want me to do that now?
Please.
Or after you want her to come to the table?
Sure.
We can make room.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
I'm sorry, I was distracted.
So at this point in the year, we are about 8.5 months into the fiscal year. We currently, our budget is at 88.9% spent, which is very typical at this time of year. Last year, we were at 88.2%. The reason that we are higher than that, essentially 70%, factor is due to encumbrances. An encumbrance, if you recall, is when we essentially earmark money that we already know that we are committed to spend. So, for example, on the school side, they earmark all of the teacher salaries because they split it evenly over the 10 months. So they've already earmarked all of that. So the school's budget itself is at a much higher percentage of spend, even though it's just the committed amount, excuse me. So that is at 96%. And that's because of all the salaries that are already earmarked. So we are right in line with where we were last year at this time of year. Yes, at this time of year for the expenses. A couple of things about our expenses, though, this year that's a little bit different. The salaries overall are going to need some adjustments during the year. We expect to be able to cover those differences with the reserve fund that we have, as well as any overages, any surplus that we have in other departments. The reason for it is, if you recall, last year we did not have all of the union contracts settled when it came time for the budget to be approved. And we also did not have the wage study completed at this time. So as a result, the budget was passed before all of those things were finalized. That did impact our salaries. Another thing that has impacted our salaries is that we have finally resolved several legal issues, which have resulted in some settlements. So you will see those that also impacted our expenses. But even with those, we are still right in line with where I would expect to be at this time of year. Concerning the revenue side, this is all general funds that I'm speaking about right now. Concerning the revenue that we are, we are actually doing a bit higher than we were last year. We are about $1.6 million higher than we were last year. The biggest factor of that is that we have received year-to-date $416,000 more due to Chapter 70. And if you recall, Chapter 70 is the money that we receive from as a direct result of the school and what the school does with special ed. And the other biggest factor is about $300,000 more in real estate due to how everything is assessed, and as Diane had explained how all of that works. So right now, I think that we are exactly where we should be for our general fund. I can go on about the other funds, or I can wait for those until after we talk to the school. What would the council like to hear?
I prefer to wait and talk about them later.
Yep. Okay. I think waiting is best.
Sure.
Mr. Smith and Mr. Fitzgerald and Ms. Blair, do you want to give an overview of your handout?
Yeah, let me just kind of give you just what's in front of you. Excuse me. There are 2 pages. The first page is our actual budget development, and it's in 2 categories. And the second page is a school committee stipend proposal. So there's 2 different line items. And I'll ask Mr. Smith to explain the budget development that's in front of you on page 1.
Sure. So this is somewhat of a global look, obviously of a much more detailed and large budget. But the first part is looking at, as I think all departments were asked to do, what are the contractual obligations. Also within that, we have a reduction, and actually I think an ending of the Essentials School Health Grant. A new grant is going to be coming in the next fiscal year, but it's not going to pick up the same items that the Essential School Health Grant did over the last 10 years?
10 years.
I think it was 10.
Yeah. Well, I've been here 4, so I know that's here.
Okay.
It's been a while.
So the new grant will pick up other things along the lines of,
salaries.
but no salaries. So we're absorbing that back into our operational budget. And then with the state looking at a prolonged yearly plan increasing the minimum wage, that triggered some renegotiation of contracts this year in a few of our different groups. So That gives you sort of the level services budget, and then as you go into new budget requests, what basically we're doing here is we're looking to continue to build upon goals that were actually put in place last year, where we're focusing not only on the academics, but we're really focusing on the whole child. And I know you may not be able to see all of this, but what we're trying to do, if you go to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's website, one of their strategic priorities is that all school districts start to integrate social and emotional education and support into everything that they do. For a long time, schools, and ELPS was part of this as well, looked at that as sort of supplemental or added services, but the reality as we get further into this work is it's always integrated into what's going on with any child. And if children are going to learn to their fullest potential, we need to be better trained and better able to support everything that's going on with that child. And that's where you see social emotional teachers being added. On the academic side, you see an instructional technology specialist that we were able to introduce last year, and we're looking to move that now to the elementary level and support our elementary schools. This will be the first year that grades 3 through 10 all test online. So in order for our students to be prepared, really they need to be working with technology of all sorts on a daily basis. And we've been working with the IT department to see how we can make that happen in a fiscally responsible way. And some of that was discussed during the capital workshop at the last meeting. So that moves us into new budget requests, and something that will pick up or connect with what Sarah was saying is that over the last few years, we're seeing a trend, a good trend, where the state Chapter 70 aid that comes into East Long Meadow has been increasing, and increasing at a pretty significant rate. Last 3 years, 4.77%. This year that we're currently in, 6.18%, and at least the governor's proposal is 7.36%, which is another about $828,000 that would come into the town general fund, which would pick up most of what we're requesting here. The thought is that as the state prioritizes social emotional learning, thankfully this is not an unfunded mandate, that they're actually increasing state aid to municipalities. So that's a very welcome event.
And one thing we're hoping is, as you can see, that we're coming in with the continued theme from last year. Last year we had a social emotional teacher at Berkshire Park Middle School and have seen an effective success. Our goal with that teacher is to keep students in our school system and not have them go out of district, which one out of district student is almost a teacher's salary for a lot of programs. And we're seeing great success at Berkshire Park. We have statistics, which we could show that to you at some time. An instructional technology specialist, we have one at the high school. Once again, we've gotten great results in professional development with that. We feel that's increased our student learning. We're going to continue that theme. So instead of coming in as we have in the past with a lot of different requests, we're kind of trying to streamline so you can see that we're keeping with the same theme year to year, because that is our priority. It's a very well thought out priority from our leadership team to the school committee and our central office.
Through the chair. I got a couple questions. So appreciate that, guys, and you know, do remember and recall spending a lot of time talking about social emotional and really what that means to the future of learning and, you know, these kids excelling in the environment and the long-term plan to try to keep more people in-house. So essentially, we give you $1, you save $1. Mm-hmm. It makes sense. So let me just go back and ask a couple questions. So the instructional technical spec teacher, is that an actual teacher? Mm-hmm. Or
it's a licensed position.
So it wouldn't fall under Ryan's group, under IT?
No, but it supports. They work really closely together. But what the instructional technology specialist does is looks at how different forms of technology will benefit a given classroom. And so, it's any number of things. It's not only just how to use a computer or a Chromebook, but it's also how do you utilize certain websites? How do you use virtual reality goggles within your lesson plan? And so what this teacher does is, on a daily and weekly basis, is not only is researching some of the new technology out there, but also taking in questions from staff who may not have the time to research, and then we'll set up time to either team teach with that staff member, or what he sets up is what he calls technology cafes. And if he's gotten a series of questions that are somewhat integrated, he'll try to put together a technology cafe around those type of different technology uses, and people can drop in during their lunch block or their duty block or their free block.
That's great. No, and
absolutely, yeah. What he's doing is he sets it all up on Google Classroom. So in a way, as he's setting this schedule, he's also teaching any of our staff members who don't use Google Classroom how to start to set that up. And so he just puts out the schedule. So yeah, anyone can drop in, but Mr. Quimby certainly likes to have another technology person in the building, and certainly there's a lot of planning that goes on there, because as as he's researching some new technology that might be introduced to the classroom, obviously we need to make sure it can be handled within our network, and are there any things that we need to know within part of it, hardware and so forth, that might need to change.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a ton of sense. Technology is only useful if you utilize it.
Right.
So I get that part of it. I'm trying to understand, because I'm trying to connect the dots here.
Sure.
Ryan is significantly understaffed to go to a one-to-one program. He's not going to be able to support it. So that's why I'm trying to understand what that role is. You explained it. This is an actual teacher. This isn't a tech person that's going to sit on his side of the fence.
Sure.
So no, I mean, that's helpful to understand. We still have the conundrum of, not just looking to approve that or fund that project, but then how's he going to support it?
Right.
On an ongoing basis. So okay, no, that answers my question. And the other quick one I have here is the reduction in the ESH grant. So are you now assuming this is 100% loss, and that you're not factoring any of the new grant because you don't know what that might bring you?
No, we're actually factoring in the new grant.
So this isn't the total loss?
It's not a total loss.
Okay.
What it does is it no longer funds salaries, it no longer funds stipends and so forth like that, which the old grant used.
Oh, so you know the parameters of it? Okay. Yeah, all right, very good. That's all I had.
We kind of knew it was coming this way a couple of years ago and hoping it was going to change, but it didn't. They're changing the grant. We no longer have this one.
Gotcha. That's all I had, Kathy.
And Pam, you said that, how much in salaries would you have to absorb now because of the grant? Did you say?
It's close to $45,000,
okay.
yes.
We actually started working parts of it in your budget the last few years, knowing that it was coming.
Anyone else with questions? Okay, so I think we're good for now. As you know, Mr. Smith will have an opportunity with Denise, unless you've already done that, to look at your actual line item.
Sure.
And then we'll have the hearing on the budget to review line items. And so there's multiple opportunities for us to crunch the numbers together and do what we're all able to do.
I may have more than one page in that next meeting.
Maybe a little more.
Thank you very much, as always.
Do you have to close your meeting?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for reminding us.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, President.
You're welcome. Okay, we are to financial matters B3, discussion of the FY20 budget.
I don't know that there's much to discuss at this point. I can tell you that I can tell you that Sarah and I are starting to not like each other. We're meeting so much together. We have met with a lot of the departments and had pretty interesting conversations. Everybody is in tune with your priority to remain at zero if they can, and other than contractual obligations. I think we're headed in a good direction to be able to present the budget on March 26th. And we're going to be meeting with the schools next week, right? Yes. I don't think we've set the date because we've, we had to do all of this.
So are we needing another budget workshop?
I don't know if we do. I unfortunately missed the last workshop. I watched it. It's not the same. Not quite the same if you watch it on, to get a flavor for the council. You asked a lot of questions. There was a lot of dialogue there. It seemed like the capital piece was pretty well vetted in that meeting. But I know Councilman Ford has some comments on capital, and I don't know if there are other questions that we can certainly prepare something. I had already sent, actually, I think it's a month ago, I sent the form that we used to present the budget last time and asked for any comments, and I haven't received any. So that's the direction we're going to head, to present in the same manner. So it's at your pleasure whether we should have a workshop or not.
Well, I'd just say that this was way more organized than last year for sure. So it was, I came away with less questions because it was nice to, have the recommendations here, have the open discussion, but it was clearer, much more concise, and down to the kind of core essentials of what, we really need to be looking at. So that's why I was pretty clear walking away from there. I just personally did a little further research on the line item for the highway project, and I don't think $100,000 is enough. There's a recommendation to keep maintenance at a certain level, and that study was essentially at like $600,000, which is
falling short every year.
So I dug out the old site map that somebody gave it to us last year. Yeah. I went through my stuff and I found that, and just drove through a couple of the neighborhoods that had red lines. There's no way those are going to get addressed this year. I mean, FY20. There's no way. There's not enough money because they have to do the main roads. So now, next year, we appropriate a substandard amount or inadequate amount. Those roads aren't getting done again. So at some point, when are you going to tell a taxpayer that the massive pothole on their street is never getting fixed? So I would ask that we think about addressing this in another manner. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bonding issue, but something related to that, and look at tackling it in maybe like a 2-year segment, and have Bruce kind of attack the most critical pieces of it while also maintaining the most critical roads. And that's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, I'm thinking 2 years worth of appropriation, so he can plan out more like 1.2 and look at it not as a $100,000 capital project that's going to fall way short. I mean, to me, I don't even think I would approve that. That seems useless to me. So that's what I was thinking. I don't know what everyone else's thoughts were, but I wanted to get more information from Denise and Sarah as to what would be the best way to look at that. Short-term lending, bonding, whatever you guys recommend.
We could talk to Bruce and see what he thinks would be the priorities and how much it would come to, and then we could look at how we'd recommend financing that, if that would be helpful.
Absolutely, we can spread it out over a period of time. We can do bonding, we can do short-term note payables, things of that nature, especially if you're looking to kick off those projects sooner rather than later. If it's that you want to plan to start those projects several years from now, then there are a couple other financing kinds of options that you can do to be building up a balance. But if the intent is to start sooner rather than later, then yeah, we can definitely come up with however much Mr. Fenny thinks for the urgent ones, and then I can work with our financial advisors to figure out, okay, how much would that cost if we were to do a short-term lending or long-term. We do have capacity to be able to do that.
I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone else. I just something that I spent a little time on and was trying to find a way to address it, but just appropriating a little bit of money each year is just gonna make it worse.
I agree with Counselor Ford on this as well, because I walked away from the Monday meeting thinking, I said, wow, $100,000, and we've got it. I mean, safe streets is a high priority for any community. I mean, we want public safety, great education, and safe streets. And we, you know, we can't, 100,000 isn't enough, and we have to talk. We just got to make sure we do it responsibly in a way that Bruce Finney's team can handle it, and we're not saying, okay, here's the money, but now you can't handle it. So I think that we need to probably bring him in and revisit this issue.
Well, I did speak to him very briefly on this before I went out of town. So they're subbing that out. So
Yeah, we would
they're
be
not going to
contracting
exceed
they're
capacity.
subbing this out? You know, like
We'd
patching?
have to.
Well,
be able to
patching was different. I'm talking about,
Major.
Actually,
yeah,
roads,
he's,
yeah.
they must go through, I don't know if they go through a bid process or whatever, but,
Yes.
yeah, so they don't have the equipment to do it,
Right.
nor would I be interested in buying them the equipment. That's something that's best to be subbed
Okay.
out. So I don't think they would exceed capacity, because most of the companies are doing business with her, yeah, pretty big, it's a contractor, and you know, you're essentially gonna have from, I don't know, when do they stop production of asphalt? So they have from June 1st to Thanksgiving-ish.
Well, they'll be opening probably April 1.
Right, but we
should be
wouldn't, the
close
money
to-
wouldn't be,
Exactly.
we wouldn't be able to give them the money until July
Yeah.
1st.
Right, and
Right.
and I'm assuming that's why you're recommending for a 2-year, so then we could then
Two
the following year
seasons, then they have
start
the
in
spring.
April rather than
Yeah.
having missed that whole April
Right.
through June period of time.
Which, yeah, because I also would imagine, and I'm not gonna speak for Bruce, but it would assume that you wouldn't want everything new all at once, because then everything comes due all at once.
Right, you stagger it.
So you'd want to stagger it a little bit. So essentially you're hitting, you know, like a spring season, I mean, you're hitting the fall season, then the following year you got the whole spring to fall season.
Well, and you can't tear up all these roads all at once
No.
either. You'll be getting different kinds of complaints then.
Yeah, so just a thought that I would just like to explore alternate avenues of addressing it.
Absolutely.
We will look at that. I would imagine we have the capacity to meet with Bruce, but I don't know that, talking to the financial planners and all of that, to get that for next week if you want to do a workshop. But we could certainly work on that through the process, the budgeting process, and continue down that road.
Yeah.
Is it possible, I know you're supposed to have a budget to us by April 1st, and we have to take action on one by
May
June
1st.
1st, but we could still have a budget workshop in April.
Oh,
in early-
I'm thinking that, I'm talking about next week.
Okay.
I would think after we present the budget on the 26th, that budget workshops, probably 2 of them, so
After
that
the
you can
26th.
vet out
Gotcha.
all of the pieces that you need after March 26th through the month of
All right.
April.
Yes.
So right now, we don't need the March 19th workshop.
I don't think so, but
Okay.
it's really, if you think there's something to talk about.
It's
I
not
would
posted yet, is it, Tom?
No.
So I'd rather wait till we have more defined data from you both.
Right, then we're not revisiting things 2 and 3 times,
Right.
so.
Okay, that sounds good.
I just wanted to add one piece, because I know the residents,
Bless you.
bless you, are concerned on the pothole situation. And during the winter, when the asphalt companies are closed, they will buy a mix that's kind of a temporary fix, like a filling, and you know, take care of it, but as the temperatures rise and decrease, that's what causes everything to expand and contract and fall apart. So in the spring, they will actually go to an asphalt company and purchase, you know, buy maybe a whole dump truck full of asphalt, the same thing we're repairing our roads with. And they have the equipment, you know, the rollers and everything else to actually go right across a road. So if we have any areas that are really in disrepair, some of these residents that are living in neighborhoods that are worried about when are we going to get to their neighborhood to fix their road, we do have an intermittent fix to be able to get in there and make the necessary repairs until the whole road is going to be redone. So.
Good.
Good. Anything else? Okay.
So just on that one, we're just gonna, get some information
Right.
back.
We'll know on the 26th, we can predict and project future
We can bring
workshops.
something,
We can
at
bring
least by
something.
then,
Yep.
have a general idea of what roads and how much that would add up to, and general funding, possible funding sources.
Yeah, what did we say that the 100,000 was, what, 1,000 feet? What did
Yes.
Bruce,
Yeah.
is that right?
That's right.
I think he said, yeah.
Doesn't go very far.
No.
Goes 1,000 feet.
Thank you, Captain Obvious.
It just came to me.
Could tell.
All right, moving on. We are moving now into old business. Item 8C1, finalization of the town manager's goal number 4. And I will defer now to our town manager evaluation subcommittee for follow-up.
Okay, thank you. We were able to meet last Wednesday, March 6th, with a quorum to discuss the issue that was at hand, which was the consideration of number 4 and how to better wordsmith that. The recommendation that came from that meeting was to basically just add a word into the beginning of it and take the other 3 comments that were made by other counselors and incorporate them into this one. So the recommendation is to reconsider move of town clerk's office and finance operations to original locations. This proposed action would improve customer service, protect privacy, and reduce costs by eliminating unnecessary expenditures. And again, since it was listed 3 times by 3 different counselors, we felt it was important to keep it, to just put it in line with the discussion that took place, which was to make sure it was in sync with the town charter and with the council's wishes.
Kathy,
Yes.
how is that measurable?
It's not.
It's not a measurable goal.
All she has to say is, I consider
reconsidered
it.
it, I didn't do it. It's not even measurable. You
It's
can't-
not measurable. And part of the issue is, I have an issue with you guys not making accommodations to allow me to participate in that. You knew I was going out of town. I responded to your email and said we could do it Monday after the budget session, which you were there, Mike was there. Would you have been available for another 15 minutes after?
Yes.
I would not have been.
Okay, well, I never got a response from you. So
Well,
now
I
we have
gave
a
you 2 days
situation.
and
All
4
right, so
times.
we're not going to do
So now we
this.
have a
Chose none of them.
situation where
Gentlemen,
we
we're-
have another revision that is not measurable goal. What's the point of it?
Well, I'm going to make a recommendation based on my interactions with our manager, who has, over the past month or so, or it may be longer, I'm just generalizing, begun to look at some other outside-the-box creative ways to reconfigure where certain departments are placed in Town Hall for optimum customer service and all the
Without
things
doing
that-
it over
right.
and over and having
Right.
people in
So-
suitcases.
I would like to suggest then that, since we know that there is good faith attempt there, and I can vouch for that in essence, the goal is being acted on, even though it's not been officially regarded as a goal, that we can drop it as a goal, since we know that the manager has taken our concern to heart, for lack of a better way to.
Prior to this even.
Right.
The goals.
For lack of a better term. That way we don't have to banter over
The goal.
the wording and the goal itself. We have 5 other goals that we set forth last week that we can that have been approved, and Denise will be working on.
Could I ask that I get a document that is not draft and redlined with just my clear goals
Certainly.
on it?
Yeah, just a
because this
one-page
is
in
whatever
black.
this translates to, because right
Yeah.
now it's 4-page
Right.
with red and green and draft on it.
Understood.
Thank you.
Can't understand that?
I'm kind of,
You don't like colors?
She was colorblind.
Kathy, do you want a motion to
Well,
eliminate
that's
goal number 4?
That would be my suggestion in terms of trying to find middle ground and being reasonable and knowing what we know.
I'll make a
That,
motion
that there's good faith attempt here to look at some options in that.
I'll make a motion to eliminate goal number 4 and remain with the 5 remaining goals that are on the
Those haven't been
managers
approved,
that
right?
have been approved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there discussion?
The only discussion I have is, I think I mentioned last week that what's important is that we look at it. I don't need it in a draft form, as long as it's being addressed. It's what's best for the town and our residents, so I would support that motion.
Any other comment? Hearing none, all those in favor of dropping the proposed goal number 4 for town manager goals and just staying with the original 5 that we approved on February 26th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Motion passes unanimously. It's good to see that one come off of our rolling agendas.
It's been a long time.
And in the next, in the same spirit, as we know, the obligation of the council is to conduct an annual evaluation of the manager, and shortly after that has been done, to outline goals as well as have a conversation about managers' compensation, which brings us to old business number 2, the town manager's compensation. We set this aside at the last meeting because we did not have a full council present, and Councilor Federici suggested tabling it until we were all present, which we are this evening, so I think it's appropriate to move forward with that. And I will just reiterate for the audience, the only remark made at that time last meeting was an overview that I gave stating that given the fact that we are still relatively early in the budget process, and yes, we're starting to see some of the numbers fall into place, that I felt it was prudent in conjunction with the fact that we gave marching orders through Denise to the department heads to stay at a 0% funding level exclusive of contract obligations, that it was my feeling that to be fiscally prudent that we ought to take the same course of action with the town manager's compensation. With the caveat, and I can't stress this enough, that should that action be taken, it has no bearing whatsoever in my eyes on performance. It's done only in the interest of being fiscally responsible right now. And that said, we either entertain a motion or open it for discussion.
I'd like to discuss it one area, please.
Mike and then Kevin.
When I look at the totality of the entire topics that we discussed, the residency requirement rises to the top with myself. I wanted to see a value put on that, and I remember as far back as the interviews, the residency issue came up. It was a topic in the charter as well, and it was the intent of the authors of that to have a residency requirement. The next phase I was involved with was the contract, and the contract has a residency requirement, as we know. So again, it correlates back to what is the value. So on, I don't have the particular date in mind, but at a council meeting, it did not make any sense to ask the town manager to move to the town of East Long Meadow to comply with a residency requirement with only 1 year left on a contract. So it was waived. So I feel that she was compensated at that point in time. So I am not in favor of additional compensation at this point in time merely for the fact that I feel the compensation took place on that specific date and time in the amount of approximately $10,000. Thank you.
Mr. Manley, and then Mr. Federici.
I just have to say that we use a rating scale of a 1 to 5, and the average would be a 2.5. That's the average. And if we're not talking about what our performance is, then what's the point of having the discussion? The performance evaluation is what the document, the measuring stick by which your raise is what we use the performance appraisal for. A, to make sure you're doing what we want you to do, but B, if you're not doing it, then your compensation is determined based on what the performance appraisal rates. And the numbers are above that, and I'm not saying that we have to go above and beyond, but you work for that appraisal and your compensation. The point of having the whole appraisal process is to determine the value of what it is. Now, I understand what you're saying, Mike, with the move and all that, and that does make some sense, so there should be some factor in there, but to say 0, now we're already out of the budget session, we're already over the 0 that we asked for. We ask for a 0 every year because we want to see what the departments can come back with as far as coming into the budget season with only what they really need. And if you say 3%, they come back with 5, then we're in a whole different world. If we say 0 and they come back with 2, okay, that's just something we can live with maybe, and that's being sort of fiscally responsible. So we asked them not to come in with some kind of crazy number. And everybody that works for Denise, whether they're a union employee and contractually obligated or not, has gotten some kind of compensation based on their job performance. So we're asking the town manager, who we've said is above average in a rating system, to take a 0, being fiscally prudent when we've given raises to everybody that works for the town manager underneath, and we've come up with a rating scale that is supposed to help us determine what the compensation is. It seems, I don't know, it seems counterintuitive to me to give then what's the point of rating it? I don't understand why we're saying a 0. It baffles me. But other than Mike, other than your comment, which I understand.
Paul, let me just please jump in. The rating scale is, you're correct, is a 1 for poor all the way to 5 excellent. The composite was a 3.382, which is a 3.4. And the number 3 indicator is average, generally meets performance standards. So we have her at average.
Above average, 3.4.
Yeah, it's
right.
above
average.
But the teacher in me compels me to say that this is the standards that you're using. What you cannot do then, because it's not statistically accurate, is to then apply our typical basic math proclivities to say, oh, between 1 and 5, the middle's 2.5, because then you're putting another matrix on top of it.
All right, I'll go with yours, that 3 is average, but we're still at an above average rating.
We're still average, or, yes.
We're between average and above average.
Right.
Yeah, because a 3.0 is not the same as a 3.9, so therefore,
correct.
you know, the statement to say that she's above average rating is accurate.
My remark was 0% because of fiscal parameters, not having, but exclusive of her performance. We acknowledge that the performance is acceptable,
So
that it's in the
Say
average.
that we have acceptable or above average performance, and we don't, but it's not worth anything.
Acceptable in the sense that there's no cause for us to, because of the composite dropping to a point where we decide that a financial penalty needs to be applied.
But there is a penalty. Everybody underneath her has raises.
Well, I will also
So that's a
remind the council
penalty.
that when our human resource director at the time, Karen Decker, came forward with the, help me to say what was the name of the study she did? Is it?
A wage study.
A wage study. It was done to make sure that employees in town, including department heads, were receiving compensation that was consistent with industry standards. Is that a fair way to say it? Which helped the union, well, not so much the union.
Yes,
but
it was union salaries.
Yes.
And
department heads.
There was comment that department heads were being left behind
Right.
because they were not getting fair compensation.
Okay.
But that wage study is separate from an annual
No
review.
raise.
We didn't tell her to freeze all her department heads.
But
We didn't say that.
No, but 6 have been redlined.
Yeah.
6, I don't think it's 6.
Well, but we have department heads who
Yeah.
have been.
We understand that,
Okay.
but we didn't.
So am I being redlined?
I understand where you're coming from, right? And Kathy,
I didn't mean it that way.
I totally agree
Yes.
in terms of the fiscal responsibility. I really have no problem with that. And Mike, I mean, you and I talked offline because I wanted to understand your point a little bit more. And I understand that. You assign a value to it. I choose not to, right? Because she lives local. There's no doubt that she has put in more than the minimum requirement from a time perspective, going to special functions and doing her job on a daily basis. So she's exceeded the requirement of what we would consider to be the minimal functions of just meeting the time requirement. So I get that. So we went through the first budget work section. I walked away from that, Kathy, and I was like, okay, Kathy's got a point. We're trying to really hold down the fort here because we have a lot of big projects that have to be addressed, like the highway project. But essentially, guys, we're talking about, just taking a modest increase of 2%. You're talking about $2,600 in a $59 million budget. That's like 0.0044. And she's got the hardest job. She's the CEO of this organization, and she's got to do all this stuff.
I agree with everything you're saying, but what I'm saying is I feel that the compensation took place far and beyond a 2% mark, which would be about $2,600. If you put a value on lifting the residency requirement, and it was in the charter,
right.
It was in the interview, and it was in the contract, and we waived it, and we all agreed unanimously to waive it. All I'm saying is that's where my compensation came from, and I believe it's worth probably $10K.
And it's a good point. Well, normally when you're asking,
we waived it.
Well, yeah, we did waive it.
We waived it with, and let me just say one thing. Sorry, Joe.
No, go ahead.
We waived that without that saying, okay, we're going to waive it, and that has a value. At the time that we waived it, we didn't say, okay, that has a value, and that's going to impact you
ever receiving
a raise. Because if that's the case, that value, we would have had to say, we're going to give that to you. And I'll just use your figure, Mike, and I'm not disagreeing with the number either. To 10 grand, so for the next 5 years, you don't get 2%. You don't get 2% for the next 5 years because you got that 2% for 5 years when the 10 grand came in. And that's not fair.
It's not.
To say to Denise, we expect you to eat that now because we never. That wasn't. We waived that for our own reasons because we didn't think it was fair to an employee with a year left on their contract, which it's not.
It's not.
To waive that requirement, and we all were in agreement with we're not going to make you move here.
No, but I would support this, right? So at some point in the fall, we've got to sit down and have a collaborative discussion. Do you want to stay? Are we going to commit to you long term? That has to be dealt with relatively soon. Yes, relatively soon. Okay, so now that issue of the residency clause is going to come up again, and if there is a long-term contract, I would understand that because, I kind of agreed to waive it on a year-to-year basis, but if we're going to make another long-term 3+ year commitment, then that should be addressed, and then it can be contractually discussed, right? Also, when you ask people to relocate, you're generally paying the VIG. That's common practice in private industry. If you ask someone to move, you're helping a relocation cost, which we did not offer.
Well, no, that's where I was part of the contract negotiations with Eric and Kathy, and the salary was depicted on a residency in East Long Meadow within a 6-month period.
Well, having said that, we were below scale. Like, we were not to the top end of what the Collins Center recommended from a salary range. We were not at the top end.
And the reason why we didn't go to the top end of the salary was because we were not looking at the time. We weren't sure what the move process was going to be, whether we were going to actually require that, how the council actually felt on the waiver, because we didn't get into that because we had gone through an interim status time when she was till December 15th, And so there was some ambiguity whether we were gonna require that or not, and there was some discussion on that. So we never went to the top because we were saying, okay, well, if we went to the top or somewhere near the top, then we need to make sure that the residency piece is a done
Yeah.
deal. Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna give you the top money, and we expect that tomorrow, you start looking for property in town, and if you don't in the next 3 weeks or whatever,
Yeah.
You're out the door.
I'm just not saying,
Those are all
we
discussions we
shouldn't
had
waive
together.
it,
Exactly.
we shouldn't waive it in perpetuity, but I do have a quick question for you, Kathy.
And then Paul needs to, before he forgets what
I'm
he
sorry,
wants to
Paul.
say.
I think
am the
he's,
oldest guy here, but I'm not gonna.
I think he's so
Yes.
patient. So assuming, let's say you're talking about a modest increase here, 2% is roughly $2,600. Since this is retro back to December, wouldn't essentially a little over 50% of that be on FY19? And the little
rest on
bit
July
extra,
1st, yes.
and then you've not got a renewal situation for next year until we determine the course of where we're taking East Long Meadow. So you're essentially, what is the influence of $1,300 on FY19 and $1,300 on FY20? That's essentially what we're talking about here. So that's where I feel like above average rating, whether you agree with it as above average or not, I think a 3.4 is above average. And I think she's got a very difficult job and a lot of things that she's got to deal with. I'm not saying, we're suggesting that, we overcompensate her, but a 2%, we have union, to Kevin's point, there's contracts, doesn't matter what your performance is in a given year, you're getting 222 for the next 3 years. Or some, I know the teacher's one is different, but most of the unions that we did were 222. And then the non-union people who were even brought up to scale, so essentially that is their raise. If they were redlined, they were overcompensated for many years. So I don't have as much empathy for someone like that than I do somebody else who was undercompensated, had a reasonable performance review, and then she awarded them a modest, couple of point raise. That's how I look at it, but Mike, I do appreciate you taking the time because I understand where you're coming from, and it's something that I would seriously consider for the next contract discussion. Like I would put value on that and/or enforce that requirement on the next go around and make it clear as to this is what our requirements are. But I don't think we made that like, hey, if you accept this and stay in 25 minutes away, we are not going to give you a raise, no matter if you get a 1 or a 5. Because then what's the incentive to get a 5?
I do have one other small point, and I'm not going to elaborate because Paul needs his turn. So I'll look at it. And this isn't rebutting because I agree with what you said. Whether it's $1,300 at 1% or 26, it's minuscule on a $60 million budget. But I also take in the check when I sit here that we're legislative. And a lot of people seem to forget that we did not take the place of the selectmen. Denise took the place of our selectmen. We took the place of our town residents. And I've had a lot of residents call and they talk about fiscal responsibility and all that's unraveled and things, the whole entire chain of events. So when I speak and I say I'm not in favor of further compensation at this point in time, I'm trying to represent and do my job and represent the residents that elected us to represent them as well. And I don't know what dialogue you might have had with them, but I just think it's fair to announce so that everybody knows where I'm coming from. And I appreciate your points, and I'm glad that you took mine under consideration.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with you, Mike.
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay,
I'm not
Paul,
gonna
it's
say
your
it.
turn quickly.
Done.
Before.
Come on, Paul.
One thing we talk about, and we talked about it before, we talked about the town manager's rating and the 3.4, and I think it was a little higher the first time. And one thing that people have asked me is, well, what is that comprised of? And my thought is, because I believe it's public information, I think it would be beneficial to the townspeople if we had both our sets of evaluations put on the town website so people could see what our concerns are with Denise and what our strong points that she has. And everybody can look at us individually and see what, how we've decided and what we've done. And I think for transparency, I think that was something that I'd be willing to propose a motion of before.
Well, actually, I think that's Denise's
I'm
purview.
okay with that.
That it's not something, we put the aggregate score out there, because we learned this last year, right?
Yes.
Do I have that correct? That we take the sum total of the 7, we put that out there, and then her employment record contains all 7, and it's her discretion as to whether or not she wants to make it public.
Well, the final evaluation document
That's the
that's
aggregate.
aggregated
That's the one
is
that we-
available for public consumption, but I see that different than posting it. I see,
Oh, right,
it's
right,
available
yeah.
for public
We present it.
inquiry. That means I, as a citizen, can come into the clerk's office and say, I'd like to see how the council rated, and the clerk would show you the rating. But I see that different than placing it on the website, which is more of a broad advertisement. That's just.
I mean, that,
I
But-
don't have
but
a
it's
problem
still-
putting it out.
That's
Okay.
small, the one that we
I
did
don't-
anyway, the
Right.
aggregate one that we did
Right.
anyway is covered here. We went over every category,
Right,
read every
exactly.
category.
But I would
mean,
agree
if you
with.
posted that thing on the website, it really doesn't matter, because they can sit and listen to the LCAT video, and they
Right.
have
It's-
everything
It's
we've
been public
already
in
said anyway.
various
The
venues.
difference is,
I would still
the
defer to
7
the
individuals
employee.
are up to her whether she wants to post it or not.
That's right, the
certainly-
individual
I
pieces.
don't have a problem.
That's her, because those are her employment records,
Right,
right?
right.
So
That's correct.
We did learn this last year, that the only responsibility we have is to come up with a system, which we did,
Yeah.
to have a objective rating system, and the aggregate score is what we present, right? So that's, and I only know that because that's how we came up with it,
Right.
right? And I'm gonna say this, I'm in support of a 2% raise for Denise, because I think that it's deserved. I mean, and I don't disagree with what you said, Mike, and I think we need to make a serious consideration in the future when we talk about what our obligations are and what kind of commitment we're gonna make, because I think that Denise has given a commitment to this community. And you can drive by the town hall anytime of 6 o'clock at night. I know she's still in her office, because I drive by there enough times at 6, and she's the only one left. But, so, to that degree, I say that there is a value placed on that, right? And we did some wavering, I guess, for lack of a better term, on the residence requirement for a bunch of different reasons that were valid at the time. Now, are those same reasons going to be valid in a year or whatever, August, when we have to sit down and come up with a new contract? Probably not, right? So I think that there's some weight that we have to have a serious discussion about what that looks like, right? We have to
Next
flesh that out.
evaluation is right around the
And I
corner,
think we have
too,
to
right?
keep in mind that
Right.
this was our first go at being an employer
Right, correct.
for a manager, and that even with the charter, we learned as we have traveled through it.
It's a lot,
So
I mean, it's,
we are
awarded
better
projects.
equipped
And the-
the
and the-
second time around to offer
Yeah.
employment.
And the
And
charter's
parameters
a
for it.
really good first pass
Yes,
document that needs minor little massages
Yeah.
here and there. It's not infallible by any means, but it's a
starting
very good starting point, and we have made improvements and accomplished a lot when you look back over, this new form of government. Compensation is motivating to people. There's a psychology behind it. I think that we're, especially given that we're appropriating this money over 2 fiscal years, it's such a minuscule amount that it's essentially not even noticeable within the whole scheme of the budget, where I don't think any of us are thinking some absurd percentage, but keep working hard, keep working on the things that we've asked you to work on. We've already had some process improvements since the feedback. So we can't just ignore, we can't always focus on the negative. And that's what we tend to do, not just in East Long Meadow, but, from a society standpoint, that there has already been process improvements. Just reviewing things, a clearer communication at the end of meetings to then we get to next meeting. You look at this last capital presentation was way better than last year. I mean, last year was tough. That was really, we wasted a lot of energy and time and frustration. And I think we frustrated the department heads too. And this year it seems to be pretty concise and flowing. And they've got pretty clear marching orders, and so do we. But already after the first budget session, we're already over 2%. We're at 2.1 or 2. We thought, just from quick assessments. So that's my 2 cents. If you want a motion, I'll be happy to put it forward.
I want to just add one comment if I could. Joe, question for you. You're suggesting 2%, and this is a rating where 3 is average and this is slightly north of 3. Let's say hypothetically she was at a 4 or 5. Would you still be saying 2%, or would you be offering a motion for 3% or 4%? Let's say she was like close to 5. Would you be looking at a 5% raise? I'm just trying to quantify this 2%. I'm thinking, like I said, somewhere in the middle, because it's just slightly above average when you aggregate the 7. So what I want to just say is, if she keeps a 3.4 and she can anticipate a 2% increase, what's the incentive to try not to get a 4.5? You know, that's where I'm going with that.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and you know, I would probably offer a higher percentage with a higher rating, but at the end of the day, when we look at, you know, and so private sector is different than municipal government. You look at municipal government, and you've got to follow the collective bargaining agreement. If you agree that someone's getting a 2% raise, it doesn't matter what their performance is. It's irrelevant.
Well,
every member is going to get the same percentage.
And you're talking about the incentivization. And if she stays at a 3.4 or 3.3, she's getting the same raise as if she was getting a 4.7. You know, that's my point.
No, I would say.
Yeah, I'm saying no.
No, but we're asking other department heads. Are we offering any department heads now that everybody is on supposedly fair scale across the state, or at least in the region? Are we looking at a message that if a department head gets a 5.0 rating, that we're looking at that department head asking for a 4 or 5% pay raise because of the rating? Here's
the only thing we can say about that is we're not responsible for the department head's pay raises. Denise is.
Well, we kind of are.
I mean, we are because of the budget, right?
Yeah.
But we're not actually giving the raise.
I would say as a compromise, a 1.5 or something. I know we're splitting hairs, but I'm just saying is that if we're giving her 2%, if she's at a 4.5, a 4.6, or 4 something, I would say some compromise. I could support that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I understand the logic of where you're coming from. You know, I just thought that was a starting point, but if you want to make a motion, and, you know, feel free. I mean, I understand.
Again,
I mean, we're talking about,
I'd like to make a comment too, through the chair, like no one else is doing. Please do that.
And then we need to move to a motion. But go ahead, Tom.
It's always something.
The town manager's compensation right now, according to the Mass Municipal Association, is above average by about 20%. The average that I was able to find from their site was $112,508. Her compensation is over $131,000. So with that said, in addition to fiscal responsibility, which we all have, not knowing what the budget is going to look like, hearing how the increases are going to be asked for, I think 0 is appropriate.
I'm not going to comment on the numbers.
Let's move.
I'll make a motion in the spirit of compromise, because I can see where this is going. That we make a pay raise at 1.5% based on the rating of the 3.4.
If I may, through the chair, we already have a motion.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Before he was about to make it, I wanted to interject.
Right. So you made the motion. Paul, did you second?
Yes.
Okay. So a motion's been made and seconded to give a 1.5% raise to the town manager's compensation package. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
The motion carries 4-3. And as Mr. Ford said, this raise is retroactive to last December 16th, going forward. Thank you. That is another item that is resolved and off of our agenda, and thank you to the audience for your patience. Moving on to new business, a proposed community preservation project at Heritage Park. We have our folks from the Recreation Department with our Director, Donna Prather, and
good evening, everybody.
And folks from the Recreation Commission, I believe. Yes.
Yes.
That's what we have.
Has Joy's been introduced to the council? Before this army of people starts, I'd like to introduce our new, what is your title, Jordy?
Deputy Director.
Deputy Director of Recreation. Jordy, what's your last name?
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel, yeah. I was caught short because I wasn't.
Welcome.
Oh, look at
Welcome
this.
to Long Meadow.
You're like a diorama, only I have one.
It's a vision board.
Thank
you.
Are we getting a handout that replicates this,
Yes.
then my recommendation might be for you to
Turn around.
face the audience so the camera and the sitting audience can, and you don't,
Thank you.
Will and sweetheart, don't feel rude that you're turning your back.
That's that new guy hazing.
Well, once again, I'm Donna Prather, the Recreation Director, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about the proposed community preservation project and Heritage Park. It's a new director's dream to inherit a completed $25,000 master plan on Heritage Park, and the ball already rolling. I'd like to turn the presentation over to Tom Kay, the chairman of the Recreation. It's due to the Recreation Commission efforts that we're here tonight.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to see us. So Nancy Roberts, Carolyn Elmendorf, Kevin McLaughlin, Don LePage, and Brian Davis are all members of the Recreation Commission. They've been working very diligently over the last few years. This has been a project that started back in 2016, and here we are today. And with a $25,000 feasibility study that's already been completed and done, with, Brian, if you could, with wetlands delineations, everything's already been done. Proper markings, all right, topography, you name it, we have it, okay? So CPC, back on May 2nd, 2018, allocated $300,000 to start phase 1 of this project. So with our change in town government, we're here before you because now it's with the new change in government, we're here in front of you to finalize that approval. So basically what we're working here is to have effective utilization of the space that we have, all right? I was in a meeting here and I saw that we had, field usage, field needs, and things like this. Well, this all ties in. But I want to be very, very blunt. Recreation is for everybody, all right? Whether it's the pink ladies walking when I first moved into town 21 years ago that came from this building and would walk over to Heritage Park. We have a plan for a walking trail through Heritage Park. We have a plan for an additional field. And these packets here show you the different things around Heritage Park. There's a lot of great things. And once again, I'm going to harken back to the importance of the utilization of the space that we have. Right? So we talk about basketball courts, crushed stone, driveway out to where we already have an existing drive-through that would not be used in the wintertime. So I think crushed stone might be feasible to keep costs down. The walking trail with crushed stone and exercise stations. So you can see, where do we have the exercise stations? Mr. LePage. And you see the walking trail.
Vanna.
Vanna.
Oh, yeah. I have 5 of them tonight. This is great. All right. An additional field above the existing field that we have. So based on the topography, so you can see. And then you can see the green markings. That is the walking trail around the existing fields that will be encompassing for all recreation activities, walking trails, exercise stations, and then in addition, an amphitheater. And you can show the pictures of different amphitheaters, especially if some of you have driven down Route 57 and seen in Agawam when they did that project. So it's an exciting time to include Rotary, summer concerts, drama clubs. This is a comprehensive plan for recreation for all, not just, and I say this all the time to our board, youth sports, all right? So it's about everybody. So we're looking for an approval of what CPC approved for the $300,000. So if you have any additional questions, please.
I'll start. That, for starters, is kudos to all of your efforts to take advantage of taking the bull by the horns and moving on such a wonderful project. And how it will elevate the capital value of that asset when all is said and done. The $300,000 from CPC, I'm surmising, is not the full price tag for the project.
It is not. This is part of the first phase.
Okay.
And we wanted to make sure that there was high impact for everybody along the way in budget items. So this has been a labor of love and also a process, all right? So whether it's open space plan to get to that point where we have grants, including the various sports organizations, whether it's lacrosse or different entities, football, soccer, field hockey, all these different entities coming together, all right, and also Friends of Recreation, and coming together and putting dollars forward, not just CPC dollars. So we're all in a collaborative together. Right?
So you alluded to phase 1. How many phases do you see for this project?
We see about 3 phases.
Okay. And are you in a position just in today's dollars to guess at what the total project might look like?
The total project of
Price tag.
The price tag of the total project in today's dollars would be about $1.8 million.
Okay.
All right, and it comes with open space plan to receive the grants. If you look at like the pond, for example, the pond is in dire straits. Right, we've had people go through there. It needs to be corrected. The embankment, the flow through the pond to this side, actually right over here. All right, is very important to the level of how that pond drains. And I think if we involve some of the town entities like DPW, I think we can get some of these projects done at a much less cost.
I got a question through the chair. So, this is awesome, guys. It's been a long time coming, and I think anybody that's actually gone back to try to utilize that soccer field or for other sports, it's really difficult. It's surrounded by trees and kind of just stuck back there. So it's not a very effective use of the space. And this came up as we're getting ready to kick off we'll call it a group, it's not an official committee, to try to talk to REC and DPW and some of the residents about their concerns, and then also about potential fundraising through signage. So there's a couple things. We have our first discussion this week, and eventually I'm going to encourage them to come speak before you guys to understand it. But one of the biggest things was not enough field. So soccer gets such high utilization and pretty much all year long, but in particular the fall, and that's when you need to take a field offline. So taking Meadowbrook offline is impossible right now, but if you build another field up there, then they have the ability to actually address what the residents are concerned about, because the field is by September the field's dead. And they just can't keep up with, because that field's getting more use than all other of the soccer fields, and Birchland gets a ton of use too. So that is huge, that we could potentially add another available field for them for that. And there's a lot of people that are really passionate about it, and it's not just the fault of the DPW that they don't want to mow the field, but they don't have enough resources either. So there's a number of projects that a number of things that have to happen concurrently in order to make a dent in the way that we manage the fields for all residents, and in particular for the youth sports, because they're utilizing them the most, and the parents sit on the sidelines and they look at the conditions of the field. So I'm so glad you guys are finally addressing this. It looks like it's going to be a great space, and even as we talk to the group about potentially raising money through signage, maybe that money should go towards here, because I don't want the money to be wasted in frivolous stuff. Otherwise, why bother raising it? It's meant to keep costs down for the kids to participate, but then if there's other money that can be available, then it probably should go to a project like this. So I'll discuss that. I think, or you're joining me this week. So yeah,
I will
awesome.
say,
thank you.
A lot of research has been done with this, especially over in Agawam and other projects that have been done through CPC monies and through grants. And one of the things that they had retired former DPW workers that specifically work the Agawam park there, that specifically handle the mowing, handle that, and they do it as a part-time basis after they retire.
Okay.
And they do it at Stanley Park too.
Through the chair?
Yes.
Has there been any consideration on, it doesn't look like from the pictures I have, that the dog park has been addressed in this? Is that staying or being moved?
Dog park stays.
Stays?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got so popular.
Don't get the dogs after
We'll let the dogs out, right?
Yeah. I didn't see it in the pictures, I just wanted to make sure that was staying.
I think it's comprehensive. I mean, the park is to be used for everybody, not just fields, but walking trails, exercise stations. You know, hopefully someday we can bring back, you know, the fishing. I remember one day fishing over there with my son back in the fishing derby days.
Yeah, but right now, anything beyond the dog park is not really usable by the residents. If you're not going back there to play soccer, then you're not going back.
Exactly, and that's why the crushed stone driveway that has that access road already out there, and you can see that in some of the pictures. We put crushed stone out there, and then also crushed stone parking just below that park. So the lower part of the existing soccer field that's up there, I like to say multi-purpose field because it's not just specific for soccer.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Another
And,
question, has there been any discussion with the police department, with the chief?
Yes.
With regards to security?
Yes.
And that is?
So if you're looking at the park on the right-hand side, there's the guardrails that are pinched in over where the playground is, on the lower side of the playground. Those are pinched in for purpose, right? Because they didn't want people driving through there. But part of the plan was actually to open that up and add crushed stone there for emergency purposes only. So you'd actually have a loop that would go below the playground and out the existing parking lot. That's on the front side over here.
Okay.
So it would go right here.
But how does that address the security of the park in general? Having spent many days in that park and dealing with issues, it could be it's a very, I mean, your plan looks great.
Yeah.
But some of the areas of the park can be very dangerous if you're by yourself or in a small group.
And I think as we open them up for the fields, there's more visibility and the sight lines that you can see directly from this building to the fields will be direct line of sight for recreation. And I also feel the more walking trails, so the existing walking trail, the plan for the walking trail would be around field 1 and field 2. It wouldn't go up to the upper level just yet. Okay. That would be added with the third field. So we're trying to bring activity to the park. So that would be behind the existing field and the second field implemented. So it would, the more usage, the more activity, the safer it would be. And that's been proven, you know. And
yes.
Through the chair. The only question I have is it looks like a great idea, obviously, but you know, people are going to look at it and go, okay, here's what it's going to cost. Do you have any idea about the potential grant dollars that could, you know, alleviate that total? I'm not going to hold you to it, but
no, and it's a chicken or the egg always here. Okay, it's getting the open space plan, which we're at, and getting the CPC approval. And the reason why we're coming to you now is because we had to make sure we had at least open space in place to come here for the CPC money. So we had approval from CPC. Now we're coming to you for the CPC money approval, but we also have open space plan that's done. So it's kind of like it's all coming together at the same time. So nothing's perfect. Do we have a $50,000 grant? I can say no. But I know that between what we're trying to do with the youth sports organizations and bringing them together, I mean, there's some significant dollars that's been fundraised over the years.
Through the chair. Has there been any discussion with CPC about future monies? Or is this a one-time deal?
No, this is not just a one-time deal. It's been talked about, but we need to have momentum with the project first.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the original money, the original $25,000 feasibility study from CPC.
What would this initial phase actually do? The 300,000.
It allows us to go out for an RFP to get real numbers.
So it would be doing the study, the feasibility study.
The feasibility study is
all
done.
of the,
It's done.
So would any of the projects, any of these pictures that you have be done?
Yes.
What do you see? The walking trail?
So we see the walking trail. We see the basketball courts. We see the field. We see especially the crushed stone and the amphitheater. Those are our top 5 things for the first $300,000 to get done. So typically, an amphitheater is about $100,000 to $125,000. All right, and if we price out crushed stone, we could maybe do. And I'm not. Please don't hold me to this.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to pull out my checkbook right now. Okay, but I think 25 to 35,000 just being in the business of knowing people that are general contractors to do the crushed stone and the parking lot area. Okay, so we're talking about 150 there. Then we're talking about the fields, and we're talking about the walking trail. And a basketball court up at Pine Knoll was going to cost us $20,000 to do.
That's a lot. I mean, it would show
You're doing
progress.
a lot with 300,000.
Yeah.
We're trying to do as
progress,
much as we
yeah.
can with
So,
competitive bids.
if I can, just to reiterate, and I'm looking at Ms. Richards from CPC.
I'm also from CPC.
This project meets, you've given the blessing from your commission.
Okay, just so that you folks know, I was not appointed, I've only gone to 2 CPC meetings. I was not appointed until after this proposal was presented to CPC. But I had the benefit of the May 2nd minutes where the vote was taken by, motion by George Kingston to support an appropriation of up to $300,000 for Heritage Park improvements, which will allow the commission, the Rec Commission, to get firm quotes and a specific proposal to present to Town Council. Now, I'm asking, because I'm a little bit confused procedurally, the only application that I've experienced, Tom, was the Norcross House, and we had firm quotes before the CPC, before we made the recommendation to the council. My understanding was that the reason why the CPC Commission moved forward with the support, which I don't object to, was so that you would be in a position to say that we have this commitment from the town to seek matching grants. Do we have any quotes? Is there anything out there yet?
So Marilyn, thank you very much. But we do have quotes that have been a little old in the tooth because it's been a long-term process.
Okay.
And also we do have a sheet of all the numbers, but I would not hold true to those numbers because numbers change. It's also been a chicken or the egg, which comes first? CPC money, grant money, or being able to go out for legitimate RFPs for approval of these dollars. So which comes first? And with the new change of government, it used to be just approval from CPC to get to move forward. Now we are here in front of you for the formal approval. So basically we went to the Ways and Means Committee, came forward, now we're here at the Florida Senate.
Previous to 2016, after CPC, I think it would have come to the floor at town meeting.
Right, exactly.
That's right.
We've replaced that.
Exactly.
That right. So my question is, and I don't know the answer, is what prohibits you from going to do the RFP now?
Nobody's going to give us a real RFP if they don't know if it's a real grant project. They're not going to give us real numbers.
And I'm not opposed to saying yes to the project. I'm just asking, you said it's chicken and egg, so.
Exactly. We've had people out there, they've asked us, so we have numbers, people have asked us, and we've given the project, we've given them the square footage, they give us a number, and that's why I know the numbers of $100,000 to $125,000, $30,000 for the stone dust and gravel.
So through the chair, so just to get things straight, this has been approved by the CPC?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Recommended to the council.
Recommended to the council, yes.
Back on May 2nd, 2018.
Okay.
So I think a lot of our capital projects, when we have our discussions, we're looking at proposals. They will give proposals. Contractors will give proposals if they know that you likely have the money. It's not something that will be cement. They'll have to be refined, but I'm sure you could get some proposals.
We can. We can
If
get
that would be of
proposals.
comfort to the council.
Once again, we have CPC money that's out there that's not spent. So if we don't get the proposals or we don't like what we want, we just pull back the CPC dollars. It doesn't mean we spent it outright.
So in other words, it means if we earmark it for you, then you have the ability to go out and say, we have the potential, we have these funds in waiting for this project, so therefore it's not just us sailing in the wind without
We're
some
not
sort of,
pontificating.
right. Right.
And Paul, that was the reason why, my understanding, the reason why the CPC Commission back on May the 2nd supported the proposal. And I'm not saying we're reneging, it's just that from a procedural point of view, it was contingent then upon getting some firm quotes so that you'd have an idea of where the dollars are being focused. You know, I didn't do it. Between, you know, there's a very specific application process that has been in place with CPC for a long time in terms of quotes and proposal and whatnot. So that's even sort of moved to this level rather than our commission. So I'm just asking the question as to, shouldn't we have some firm quotes before we move forward? Shouldn't we have some firm quotes?
Well, we're looking at quotes, but they're a little old, but we're looking at them right now.
Yeah, there is some.
Oh, okay, well, that's.
Kathy, do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
So through the chair, so just want to make sure I got this procedurally right. There's $300,000 that's been suggested to appropriate, and whether you're not ready to spend the money anyhow.
Correct.
So now you go procedurally, you get your quotes, you've been approved to spend the money, you get your quotes, and then you do the work. Or you get your quotes, we approve the money, and then you do the work. Either way, the project's moving forward. The question is, how much of phase one are you going to be able to get done?
Correct.
Which is a little bit unknown because you need to update this because of data.
Exactly.
So I'm completely comfortable with approving it contingent upon, you know, proper RFP process. We're not going to review that. I mean, I don't even know if does that come before you?
We would have to look at it, yeah.
Yeah,
For
so once it's
procurement law,
done,
we'd look
the
at it.
checks and balances is your office, so I'm.
Finance, yeah.
I'm fine, I'm fine.
Sarah's.
Yeah, I feel comfortable. So, so I mean, how do you want the motion
I want to
worded?
just, Mr. Page in the audience asked to speak, so I'm going to.
Thank you. Ralph Page. Sure, come on now.
It's not us.
Hey, Tom. The way I understood this was a public hearing would be held so the public could weigh in on what they thought, such as a town meeting, before the council would vote on appropriating $300,000. With that being said, I was on CPC. One of my votes was the $25,000 to look at the study. I think it's a great project. I hope it does move forwards. I know CPC looked at this and said, if we don't allocate a certain amount of money, you can't get a matching grant for it. The grant people won't look at it and say, oh, well, we're going to give you this. So if the town's willing to say, hey, we can give you up to $300,000, then they can submit for grants, matching grants, before anything goes out and looked at. But I think before any of that's done, a public hearing should be held so all the public can weigh in on it. Thank you.
I think Mr. Page is correct, but I don't have the CPC regulations in front of me. I didn't think to bring that tonight. It's a whole separate document. The parameters that CPC it has to go, but I do have it in my office. I can get it, and so postponing the decision by 2 weeks and possibly setting a public hearing if that's needed, and I think there is that. I think that's correct.
I don't think, I don't want to put words in 7 mouths here, but I don't think anybody at this table is going to vote against the project. So I'd rather err on the side of
procedurally
safety,
being correct.
Well, doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And if there's a public hearing, I would imagine you're going to get positive feedback.
Yeah, this isn't the first one that we've done. Have we done a public hearing in any of the other ones?
I think we did, yeah.
On the Norcross one?
Oh, Norcross. I mean, the
We
original.
should do one on the gravestones.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't ever remember.
Never did a
You're
public
right,
hearing
we
on
did one on the
CPC money for the gravestones.
I wonder if it has to do with the size
The
of the
amount?
grant.
Maybe
yeah.
the amount of money?
The gravestones was only $10,000.
Yeah, maybe
I'll
if you
look
can,
at
if you can
I'll look at it.
Just if you just look into it.
Yeah,
and
but can
give
you,
us guidance.
or can you forward it to Kathy and she'll distribute it? I'd like to
Right.
see it. But
Yeah.
no, if that's, fine, if that's the procedure we have to go through, then
Yeah.
that's fine.
Tom?
So one of the points of doing the CPC and the open space plan and coming together is for the benefit of the grants. That's why I mentioned the chicken or the egg. CPC money, you have the CPC money available, then you can go after the grants that they know that we're actually
Right.
going after a
Funding
project.
something, yeah.
Could I ask what the status of the open space agreement is? I understood it was in the hands of the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to fine tune it, and then it was coming back to the town for a public hearing?
That's correct. It came back, and the committee, we got it back just before I left on vacation last week. But the Pioneer Valley gave us a couple things they want us to fine tune. And then.
So there's still going to be a public hearing?
Oh, yes.
So that the town will know? Yeah. Great, thanks, Donna.
So then, Donna, are we saying that we need to, if Pioneer Valley is asking for some tweaking of your open space plan, shouldn't that occur before we jump into the whole thing? I don't know the answer to that, I'm asking.
Once again, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
Well, the open space plan talks about all of this, correct?
Correct.
Are there any PC changes to all of this, or is it just kind of
It's more
tweaking
cleaning up the
wording?
document.
Yeah, so then a public hearing on that as well, right?
Correct.
So we just want to make sure that we've procedurally followed, the process. If we approve tonight and to find out that we did in fact have to, we just, unfortunately, I think it's prudent to just delay 2 weeks. When's our next meeting?
Yeah,
The 26th.
Yeah, the 26th, so as much as we'd like to give you an answer, just, because I'm unclear on that now that you say that, maybe, because I'm thinking of a couple that we did, and
But they were small
they were
numbers.
small amounts, so maybe there is
There's
a
a
threshold
threshold.
that
Yeah,
says
maybe, I don't
X
know.
amount of dollars, and
Above
you
100,000
have
might
to,
be-
you have no choice.
Well, the RFP is anything over 20,000 if I'm correct?
Yes.
Was Norcross over $20,000?
Norcross was 25,000, as was your study, right?
Correct.
But we're saying
We're
the
saying-
parameters in CPC around public hearings
Yeah.
for a certain amount of
Yeah.
money toward a
I'll have to look
project.
at
For
that.
other CPC money, we didn't do public hearings. So.
Yeah,
but
like for the pool, we did a public hearing.
The actual
They're
dollar
relatively
figure
small.
was
But it's
well
town
lower,
meeting,
it's
yeah.
well lower than.
Yeah, they were relatively small projects, so,
we spend a year.
Plus some of them fell under town meeting, so that was a totally different animal.
yes.
Oh, yeah. Marilyn?
Kathy, one other comment, just so it's not confusing. The April 3rd meeting of the CPC committee is publicizing a public hearing. That public hearing is an annual requirement for CPC to basically have an opportunity to provide for the community what we do, what we look for,
Right.
just to sort of create some interest in the event that there are other folks out there that would like to take advantage.
It's
of-
more information. provided.
Exactly. So that's not the hearing we're
That's not
talking
what this
about.
would be.
Just wanted you to know.
Okay. All right, so it sounds as though
I'll do
Denise,
that.
you're going to
Yeah.
verify what the council
Process.
needs to do, and if it
Correct.
needs to be a public hearing, Tom will get it written, scheduled, and advertised, and
Would the open hearing be then at the same time?
In
The
2
public
weeks.
hearing?
You're saying the public hearing in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
oh, no, I don't think, we have to
You have to
publicize
advertise.
for that in the reminder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or a publication, at least once, right? We have, 2 times
Two
before we hold it.
consecutive
Okay.
weeks.
Something we could do it for this. Okay, so you're probably looking at April in that regard, but
When the weather thaws anyways.
that's right, you can. Pick a field yet. Okay, well, thank you for that feedback. It's, we're looking forward to that. That's an
If I might
absolute
add-
wonderful use, capital asset for the town.
Thank you very much. And the commission, Recreation Commission, meets on the first and third Monday of every month.
Okay.
All right? Thank you.
And where's they meet? Tom, where do they meet?
Thank you, guys.
Right here? They meet right in this room?
Right, well,
Next
in
time.
a little room. We don't get as big of attendance.
You might want this. That could
I
be a
hope
good
so.
thing.
Hold the public hearing.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
I'm really questioning if there's a threshold for
It's gotta be what it is, because I know the other ones we didn't lose.
Moving on to number D2 under new business, a zone change petition for Zero Peas Road. We have Attorney Martin representing the petitioners.
That is correct.
With you in a second here.
Let's go.
And Mr. Martin, for the record, I noticed you have a transcriptionist, so would
Yes.
you just please identify
This
to
is
meet the requirements of MGL?
Yes, this is-
MGL, not
this,
MGL.
this is Sharon Waskowitz from Katuno. And this is Chris Little, the project manager from ECOS.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of things I just want to sort out here so we can have this go fairly swiftly. We'll just give her a minute to boot up and then we'll be ready to go, okay? Thank you. I can circulate an overview of the site. Next one.
Thank you.
Should start there.
Must be. This is great. It's looking all about that.
This is peas. Gotcha. This is peas. Oh,
Gas on there, okay?
Oh, sure.
And that could be gas as well. I don't know if the state I can see boundaries, and I can see boundary space in front of me.
Actually, I
Oh,
don't
down here.
No, I'm saying.
Yeah, this must be, you have it.
I do, yes.
Speculation on what's going on.
Yeah, goes wrong.
I think this is this is Pennsylvania. I think this is fire. We'll find out. Sure.
You let me know when you're ready, okay?
No, it's because Bella Vista, this is Bella Vista.
Yeah, and that's not,
And
connecting line would be probably.
Probably down here,
Bella
somewhere.
Vista is way further down. You have to get to Southbrook first before you cross over the line.
I think it's probably.
Okay.
All right, we have rampant speculation going on here, so we might need clarification.
Are you ready?
Definition of this.
Okay.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay, so
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is James Martin. I'm with the law firm Robinson Donovan in Springfield, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the petitioner to present to you the reasons why we are requesting and asking for you to approve the proposed zone change for the parcel at 0 South Pease Road. I've just passed around an overview of the location. If any of you are not familiar with it, I have plenty of maps in more detail for the site. I will remind you that we started this process when we came to this august board and asked that you approve the petition to be sent to the planning board in accordance with the process. At that time you did, and we went then before the planning board for a hearing. The hearing was conducted, and the planning board made a decision not to recommend the zone change, and that is before you. We took the somewhat extraordinary step of still going forward with this zone change because we think very strongly of the merits of the zone change for the town of East Long Meadow, despite the purview of the planning board, and we're partly here tonight to tell you why we think that is so. I've had the privilege of working on many real estate projects here in East Long Meadow, from development to fulfillment. Great Woods, the Ryan Center for Bay Path, and the Fields at Chestnut, which required 2 zone changes. Back when American Saw owned the property, we petitioned the town to change it from residential to industrial so that American Saw could expand. And then when the idea came about a age-restricted facility, we petitioned the town again to change it from industrial to age-restricted, but we had to create the age-restricted before we could do it. So I appreciate the complexity of zone changes and the reasons why they need to be carefully reviewed. As I said, we're here tonight because my client believes firmly that this is in the best interest of the town and for the community in general. This parcel is landlocked. It borders on the Connecticut border in Summers. There's no frontage, and so the reason the petition requests zone change to industrial garden instead of industrial is because the industrial zone requires frontage. So the only choice left was industrial garden. It's surrounded by utility-owned property. If you are familiar with the site, you'll know that Eversource owns 4 parcels that are immediately around it, which their high transmission lines run through. And then north of that is the Redstone Farms and Barns, LLC, which also is an undeveloped parcel. There is some residential development to the east, but none of it abuts this project. And as you can see from the density of the lots, that all of it is forested and treed. And I've been over there several times, and you can't see this lot from that location. And that's, I think, important. I know at the planning board meeting, a couple of residents said that they live over there and they were concerned about this property being rezoned and that would affect the value of their property. Well, I'll start out with an important point, I think, in terms of addressing that. Eversource, as the owner of this property, has the right to petition the DPU to put in solar on all their property that are right there now. They've done that once in East Long Meadow already, and it was. So I think the fact that to someone to say, well, we're going to change this because of a potential putting solar in is misguided, because right now Eversource could do that. There was a comment made that at the planning board, which was hearsay, that someone said, well, I've heard Eversource is going to sell that property. Well, their high transmission lines run right through it, so unless they're selling it to another another utility company, it's unlikely that they're going to do that. So we are here in an age when solar and alternative energy is becoming more important every day. We're in a state where our 2 senators have endorsed, United States senators have endorsed this green program. Our governor has initiated a program to reduce fossil fuel and to promote alternative energy. And in fact, the town of East Long Meadow, through its bylaws, makes it very clear that they added the solar bylaw to promote the development of solar energy. Unfortunately, they promote it by restricting on where it can go. And I suggest to you that that makes it very difficult to develop solar in East Long Meadow when you have to put it in industrial or industrial garden. It does so because, first of all, there are many restrictions in your industrial and your industrial garden districts that make the development of solar impossible. You can't put a solar farm next to 2 warehouses or industrial buildings. You get the shade. You have restrictions on setbacks and heights, and all of that makes it very difficult to develop solar. So in essence, solar is very restricted in East Long Meadow. At the hearing, one of the persons on this planning board suggested that, oh, well, Mr. Martin, go over to Denslow and Deer Park and offer to buy a lot. They'd love to sell it to you. I first made it clear I'm not buying any lots, but I looked into it, and the Deer Park Industrial Park has this thick document on record on the restrictions that can go in to Deer Park and Denslow Park, and you can't put a solar farm in there. Now, there's the do's and the don'ts, and everything else is up to the ultimate discretion of the restrictions of the development company, Western Mass Area Development Company. You could never get a solar farm in this park, even if you could get it approved. The lots that are available are between lots. They're not big enough. They don't have interconnections. They don't have the right soil, and they're not what the Denslow and Deer Park preamble says. They're not for the purpose of promoting light industrial manufacturing, warehousing, and employment. A solar farm doesn't meet any of those, as good as the solar farm is. This solar farm, in particular, would compensate for the generation of electricity for 1,200 homes in East Long Meadow. And I've had the pleasure of sitting here tonight and hearing about this project and this issue. I think so far we're the only only group that's come before you said, can we give you some money? You know, we'd like to build this project. We'd like to generate some taxes. We'd like to work with the town to make a contribution towards that. So because it's severely restricted elsewhere, it's important to understand that this solar project doesn't, as I said, doesn't border any residential property, and the statutes in enacting solar development said that the paramount objective is to promote the public welfare. Well, if we're going to reduce fossil fuel, and we're going to reduce carbon emissions, and if we're going to generate alternative energy, that is promoting the public welfare, in our opinion. In the planning board's review of this, I received a letter from the town of East Long Meadow, from the, I believe it's the town planner, Concert Broaders, and it summarized the 3 reasons why the planning board did not feel that they could endorse the petition. The first one was that it was not consistent with the master plan of 1976. Quick run of math shows that that's 43 years ago. Solar was just a twinkle in the eye of development.
Excuse me, to the chair, do you have extra copies of that for our review?
This letter? I do not, but
we will get those out to the council tomorrow.
It's a public record. It was sent on behalf of...
I understand, but
yeah.
just like to
okay.
work
Do
on
we have
it.
a copy of the 1976 master plan? We can look at it just to see.
Sure.
It's referenced master plan set 1976 in the letter, and it said about its goals, and its goals were to use the property in the town for the development on the land types and locations that are most suitable. Solar, I suggest to you, wasn't being developed in 1976, and to rely on a 1976 master plan when so many things have changed in every community, I think is not supportive of the law of promoting solar energy. It also doesn't, take into consideration the changes in the climate, the changes in the need for alternative energy, and it doesn't take into consideration the fact that there are plenty of case law out there that says, there's actually a Supreme Court case that says that, the changing climate is a threat to the residents of Massachusetts, and in the absence of clear language to the contrary, all statutes will be construed to prevent damage. And so if you're going to look at it that way, if we're a solar farm create damage, it enhances the citizens and it enhances the goal of reducing fossil fuels. So I don't see anything in the master plan that talks about solar. So I know there's some people who are familiar with this master plan, who have worked on it. They're great contributors to East Long Meadow at many committees. But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't add up to rely on a 1976 plan. The second thing was that the town planning board wrote that the town allows by right the use of, creation of photovoltaic arrays in the industrial garden and the industrial district. And that is true. They do. But as a practical matter, there's no place. As I said before, you can't do them in the Denzel and Deer Park Industrial Park unless you can get a waiver to put that in. And as a practical matter, no developer would be able to build one. Mr. Little's been with the company 10 years. He'll tell you that they looked at just post looking at that, and they didn't feel that they could put anything practical in there. This is a 27, 28 acre parcel. You build right to the edges. You fence it in. It doesn't make any noise. It doesn't create any traffic. It creates energy when the sun shines and puts it back into the system. It pays revenue to the town. This is not something that harms the town in any way. No one can access it. No one can see it. Right to the south of it, this petitioner owns the property in Summers. They already have approved by the town of Summers another solar array, which they will construct, but since its access is through Summers, they were looking to build in East Long Meadow and then move down. So that's a very important fact to take into consideration. This property is zoned residential, as are the Eversource parcels around it, and it's interesting to consider keeping it residential. I've heard other presentations at the planning board most recently about concern of new homes in East Long Meadow as an issue for the town. Would it put the town in a position of not having enough affordable housing? Would it put too much of a strain on the fire and the police and our school systems? So here, taking into consideration promoting the general welfare, does it make sense to have an inaccessible, unseeable parcel turned into a positive, or to hold it someday for the hope that someone would build a subdivision back there? In order to do so, they'd have to get through or buy the Eversource parcels to get to this parcel. I suggest to you that that doesn't add up very well either. Another factor to take into consideration of preserving this as a residential lot is that to the east boundary, the Summers Prison System owns property, and they have a facility that just tips next to it. So the question would be, how attractive would this lot be as abutting the prison system? So while it's true that you can build them in the district, the practical answer is you can't. If the town wants to be true to its mission and to its statement in its bylaws that it wants to promote solar, it has to be flexible and allow it to go in a place where it makes sense. And this lot makes perfect sense. So the third reason, and I'm sorry I didn't bring these, is that the use of it is inconsistent with other uses. By the way, there's no data to support that it's inconsistent. It was just a conclusion that it's inconsistent. I'd suggest to you it's not inconsistent for the reasons that I've just cited to you, that it promotes and enhances the general public and welfare of this town. And it puts East Long Meadow a step forward in doing its part to create renewable energy. Let me just say that the industrial garden choice, as I said, is the only choice for us because we don't have any frontage, so we can't go industrial. And it wouldn't make any difference anyway. We couldn't build it in an industrial section. But if you look at the zoning map, and again, this was submitted at the planning board hearing, it's not that far-fetched to see that, we're the red here. All this is red. This is white, and then this is all industrial garden. So it's not that far out away from all of the industrial garden section over here, of which there's no room for us to build a solar farm. This is the parcel. So there is a connection to the industrial garden district. I raised that because some folks have suggested at the hearing that, is this spot zoning? And I would suggest to you it's my legal opinion that it's not. For not only the fact that it's tangential, but that it doesn't meet the definition of spot zoning as I understand it. I've been involved with cases about spot zoning. Recently was one in Long Meadow for the mansion, which many of you may read about. I worked on that matter. We maintained that it wasn't spot zoning. The town officials ultimately agreed with their town council. But more importantly, it went to the Attorney General's office for review after the zone change was made. And she opined that it was not spot zoning, that it was consistent with the efforts of the town. And in fact, the chairman of the planning board, I think, is on record of saying that he's in favor of an overlay district for solar. Well, you know, if that's the case, then, you know, if you created that overlay, then people could come in and say, I want to put it here, I want to put it here, I want to put it here on the overlay district. So here, it's a lot simpler than what we're proposing. We've got an out-of-sight, out-of-mind parcel that is going to create a lot of good for the town, and it will, I think, I was reminded properly of the distinction of your roles. You represent the citizens now, and this is my town meeting. It's not in the gym anymore, it's here. And my job is to present and persuade you that this is something that East Long Meadow should do. And I think as you read today, I heard on NPR driving over here that shortly South Carolina is going to be Miami, and Philadelphia is going to be South Carolina, and it's going to move up the line. It's a real thing. Climate change is happening around us all the time. Anything that this community can do to contribute to the slowing down of that and being responsible and promoting the health and welfare of its community is important, particularly in a lot such as this, which, as I say, is inaccessible and non-viewable. I appreciate the fact that some people are going to say it's not consistent with the plan. I'm sure some homeowners would say, I don't want to look at it. It's too close to my house. I built down there because, it's going to be, I like looking at the woods. But your responsibility as the town is what's in the best interest in the general welfare overall of the town, and what are our responsibilities. And I suggest to you and ask you to, when considering that, to conclude that this petition is worthy and this zone change ought to be granted. I don't know if Mr. Little has anything else he'd like to say.
I would only add, part of my role with this company is, my current employer is acquiring real estate. In a previous profession, I worked as a land acquisition manager for a national home builder called Ryland Homes. They're no longer in existence. But I can tell...
Not because of anything you did.
No, but I can tell you unequivocally, if I looked at this residential parcel as a potential development and it's next to a state prison, I'm not touching it. It's much more suitable for an industrial type use. But a solar farm is a perfect buffer between the prison and other residential uses. So I submit that to you for your consideration.
Questions from the council?
I just had a quick question, because, from preparing for tonight, all I had is this email that they're coming. I don't have any of this documentation, or I would love to see the, I would have prepared, I would have watched the planning board meeting. Right. I'm not like, I don't have anything in front of me other than what's just been verbally presented. So, I have a ton of questions. I'll defer to you, Tom, but I guess like in preparing for this, I wasn't expecting this. There's just a 2-sentence email here, So I'm a little at a disadvantage.
I also will tag on to that to say that going forward, when the planning board should make a decision that is contrary to what the petitioner is hoping for, in this case a no vote, then we should be advised of that ASAP. Certainly. Because down the road we might be visited by the petitioner, and here we are. So yes, I feel as though I'm at the table with no preparation to give proper consideration So now I'll just defer to Don.
I will offer, I'll be happy to make copies.
We'll get all that. I'm
submit it
not
to,
pointing the finger at
Mr.
Clerk of the-
Florence
right.
tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I'm not, certainly not pointing the finger at you. I'm saying that I feel like we need to be better prepared to give you, proper opportunity to be heard.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Don.
Okay.
Councilman Yates.
Counselor. All right, let's go over a couple things, if you don't mind, Jim.
I do not.
I have a few concerns. And obviously, if the council wants to move forward on this, and I remind the council, and you can agree, a zone change is not a matter of right, it is a matter of discretion. We agree on that.
That's why we're here.
And it would go to the subcommittee that I chair, Planning Matters, and for further discussion. And of course, it's a twofold thing. You'd have to have a zoning map. The zoning map would have to be approved, and we'd have to discuss the zone change. I have a couple concerns with the location, as well as using it as an industrial garden for that use, because we referred back in 1976 master plan. We also can look back in 1980s subdivisions where the deed restrictions would say no satellite dishes, because back in the day satellite dishes were over 10 feet and people didn't want them, and now this could be a satellite dish. So the question is not so much and we remember, we don't vote on projects, we vote on the zone change.
Correct.
And the zone change is industrial garden. So if you have, huge panels of solar array that someday in the future, you can have at the size of this, creating that use, that energy. The rest of the land is still industrial garden. And you can have a number of uses that are currently allowed under industrial garden. Or if the economy is having satellites creating electricity and these arcane things from the early 2020s, these solar arrays are no longer useful. So the concern is we have to look at this. What you're asking is to change this into an industrial garden zone. And we have to be mindful of all the potential uses it could be. And one of the comments you guys made is its proximate location to the Summers Jail. Let's say hypothetically one of the occupants of the Summers Jail decided to look for a better place and gets arrested in East Longmeadow property. How do we deal with that logistically when the East Longmeadow police, or if there's a fire or vandalism or something? We'd have to have a cross-state agreement with the state of Connecticut and the town of Summers to basically, how do we deal with police and fire of East Longmeadow on East Longmeadow land with sirens running through Connecticut trying to come in and deal with that potential issue and make that arrest, because it would be an arrest in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So there's a lot of questions I have. There's also one of the points you made is that the citizens of East Longmeadow would be reaping the benefit of this, like 1,200 homes. How does that run to East Longmeadow, or would the citizens of Connecticut be reaping the benefit of this? I don't know. I'm just raising questions at this point. And so at this point, like I said, I'll yield whatever time I have left to the rest of our council. But I do have some big questions as to the choice, and albeit I understand why you're picking the choice, because that's the choice that was handed to you. But is this piece of land appropriate not only for a solar array, but for all the other potential uses that an industrial garden would afford it?
If I could just respond quickly, Madam. First of all, we understand the process. So if we went through the subcommittee and got the zone change, we still then have to come back and get the project permitted. So it's not like a done deal, thank you, we're never going to see you again. So the town is involved with this every step of the way. Number two is what I said was, if I didn't say it correctly, I want to say it, as I said, the energy that this will generate will offset the consumption of 1,200 homes of East Long Meadow. So that's a win-win, frankly, for the environment and for this community. We had a roundtable at the very start of this, before I came to see you. And the chief of police was there, and the fire department was there, and Ms. Bishop was there, and all the departments were there, and we had a nice dialogue, I thought. And that was discussed, and you know, this would come up again if we went through the process and got the zone change. But my recollection is that the police and fire, you know, said we just need to make some arrangements so that we can get in through Summers and go in if there's a problem there. You know, if you have a gate or if you have something that's locked, we need to get in there. You know, police oftentimes get permission to go across state line to pursue someone or do something. You know, that didn't seem to be anywhere of a major concern to them. It had to be addressed, you know, with 911, where the address was and how we get there and that sort of thing. But at least my recollection is that it didn't. So, and as for the last point, it is true that any change you make now, if something changes, you know, my cell phone used to be this big and pocket calculator was this big, that could happen. But first of all, by limiting it to industrial garden, there's not a lot of damage that can be done unless you consider the things that are going on in Deer Park and other places as to be horrendous for the community. Secondly, in terms of planning and being the town voice, you have to look forward. And you can't just say, well, I can't change anything because 40 years from now or 50 years from now, they could be this small and we don't need that much land. And then you could put, you know, a warehouse down there. But you could. I think it's important to understand that Eversource owns that property.
I have a question after that.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, you couldn't put a warehouse down there because the only way to get there is through Summers, right?
That was going to be my last point. We own the property. My client owns the property in Summers.
So, bottom line is that piece that's in East Long Meadow.
Correct.
If you were to put a warehouse down there, the only person that has access to the warehouse is you because you own the only way to get in.
Correct.
No?
Currently, as it stands, yes.
Right. I mean, you could sell it or whatever, but.
Right. Or if we got alternative access, but we don't have that as of right now.
Through the chair, I actually have a question for Don, because I know you have a lot more experience in these matters than I do. Is it possible to give a conditional approval, like it can, we're gonna make an industrial garden, but it can only be used for this specific purpose that it was originally allocated for?
No, you can't. What they'd have to do is create yet another zone, a brand new zone that we could call it a green zone.
So you either approve it for that in perpetuity, and then if they decide to rip out the solar farm.
The point he made about Deer Park, West Mass has a plethora of deed restrictions and so forth on there. Those deed restrictions would not transfer over to this new zone, this industrial garden zone. So what you're seeing over there is a function of both the industrial garden coupled with West Mass deed restrictions. Mm-hmm. This would be pure industrial garden without affording those deed restrictions.
Okay, now that answers my question. So then as a follow-up, so an industrial with no frontage is completely unacceptable, there's no exceptions?
As the way the bylaw was drafted, it was drafted, I believe, for purposes of having this type of facility within that area.
Right.
And what they're now trying to do is move that area into this area.
Yeah, and I totally agree that we need to look at moving us forward. You know, there's been other instances where we came out and you know, we made so much restrictions, you could basically put it on a size of a quarter in a certain place in East Long Meadow, and that was the only way that those certain things are going to get done. So there is a bigger issue at hand here that does need to be addressed, and you know, other people that build things on industrial properties or you know other zonings, you know, you expect them to be for a particular use, but you don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now. I mean, that's so I understand that, and I take that with a grain of salt, but I definitely would like to process more here, and I'd even like to look at the tape of the planning board meeting before I, you know, really kind of pass any judgment, because I just wasn't, you know, prepared. But that's helpful, Don. Thank you.
My suggestion, and again through the chair, is because we need that information, and also, looking at the planning board meeting, which I happen to have been there in the audience anyway. But I think that the council should see it, and before we make a recommendation to send it to the Planning Matters Subcommittee, is to reconvene in a couple weeks, pending your schedule, with all that information, so that we can be afforded the opportunity to ask the petitioner even more questions.
Do you, off the top of your head, either of you remember the date of that meeting where the...
I don't remember off the top of my head, but the letter says on November 20th, 2018.
Well, that's close to
I
it.
didn't want to give the impression I could really remember that.
Yeah, they're all on, Jim, they're all on YouTube,
Right,
If we know what the time is, we could be able to.
I just got the station, LCAT 01028 on YouTube.
Oh, we know the station, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a question of the time.
Which
And at what
meeting,
part in the
yeah.
meeting was this hearing? Where were you in the agenda, so we don't have to watch the whole?
Well,
again, this, we
I
can.
can,
We'll know that because
well,
I
I can
think
tell
the
you the
beginning of
mixed
the tape
use
gives you an
at the
overview.
package machinery zone change was discussed before us.
Okay.
So that's
So you were in the beginning?
We were not in the beginning.
Yeah, okay.
We were not in the beginning.
We can get that through Tom and through...
Right.
If we can ask Don to throw, maybe we can ask Don to put the clip so all 7 of us get the
Don
same
Mackey,
thing.
not
Needs
me.
to,
Okay.
and he needs to get you the other
May
information.
I ask a question, please? Now, we're talking about a zone change, correct? What does the charter say about a zone change when it comes before the council?
Get a public hearing.
You need public hearings.
Right.
And
Well,
so-
none of that's.
Yeah, we know that.
All right, I'm thinking you put...
We're at
No,
step
Marilyn,
one.
we're only doing preemptive discussion through the chair of whether this matter should even go
to a
to
public-
our
Okay, all right, so
subcommittee.
that's, okay. As a
And then
member
from
of
the
committee, all right.
subcommittee,
We know that it
reel
requires a
back,
hearing.
Thank you,
right.
I
and
appreciate
then
that.
decide about public hearings and so forth at that point.
And just another comment, please, having been through the process with the planning board, and the advertisement at that time was for Industrial Garden Park, and I thought it was my understanding, as we went through the process, that it was determined that the Industrial Garden Park requires frontage, and this property does not have frontage, and the other only zone available would be the industrial zone. Because I thought you said that, but they were...
The petition, because we did not know at the time, is industrial garden / industrial. So
They're
that's
two
what the...
separate zones.
Right, that's what, to change the one that was appropriate.
Okay, and what is it? Industrial garden?
Industrial garden requires frontage, industrial
Correct.
doesn't.
So you're looking for industrial?
Correct.
All right, I just wanted to clarify.
No, that's not.
Mr. Page in the back.
In the zoning bylaws, it specifically breaks down industrial districts. That's a headline. And then there's 2 separate. Industrial Garden Park is one, and industrial is another. Industrial Garden Park would be Deer Park and all the surrounding area, which you pointed out on the map was so close. Needs 250 feet of frontage to be Industrial Garden Park.
Correct.
Along the actual railroad line is our industrial zone. That does not require frontage. So if we were to go forwards with this, he would be looking at the industrial zone in the middle of the residential zone. But with that being said, I believe most of this should be done at a public hearing for a zone change, so the whole public can weigh in.
We might, yeah, I mean,
We're not
guys,
even
we're,
putting in.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Well, I appreciate the comments, guys, and thank you for the insight, but I'm just looking for basic information here. We may not even get to Don's subcommittee meeting, but at the same time, these are the kind of challenges that get presented to East Long Meadow that we don't seem to do particularly well with. Like, you know, there are times where you have to, like, think about, like, the scope of the project, what they're trying to do, and how we could possibly do that without setting a horrible precedent for other people to do other things that aren't a solar farm.
Right.
Talking about a solar farm. I think, you know, me personally, I guess I'm a little biased because I have it on my house. I don't see that as a huge detractor. So how are we going to figure this out if there's a way to do it within reason? And that's where I just want more data, I want more information, I want to be able to process it and then hear from people that, you know, are on the subcommittee and go from there. So it's like, I just don't want you guys to think that we're making a decision tonight. The first I heard of this was 20 minutes ago.
And we have the committee, it's already formed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
We just need more information.
Right,
Yeah.
So I think
But we
that.
can't just say no to everything because it doesn't fit in our neat little box.
Exactly.
Because we've done that in the
It's not
past.
one size fits all.
Yeah,
That's
and
right,
it's
yeah.
been 3 years and we really haven't improved how we address projects like this.
But it was necessary for us to come here tonight to start that process.
That's,
No, we appreciate
we
that.
get that.
Yes.
But just to be clear, if, through the chair, just one this is a huge point. And I could have, maybe it's a late night and I wasn't listening, but I thought at the onset, you were talking about changing it to industrial garden.
Correct, I misspoke.
That's
It's
misspoke.
industrial,
So
because
it's
we
full
don't have
industrial.
frontage.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear because.
Everyone does need frontage, that's what he's looking for.
Everyone, which is the most permissive. Okay, that's, all right, very good. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to do more homework.
Yes.
And we'll set this aside till another meeting. Do you want to put it on just 2 weeks from now? Or
We should be fine, right?
in 2 weeks, is everybody, as long as we get the information.
Right, I
Yeah.
think that's obviously.
Well, the information that Tom or Denise has to get to us can be done electronically in one day.
And you can get.
And we all need to watch the video.
Right.
Which probably isn't that long.
No, the piece that is their involvement. Right.
Yeah.
So
And I'll
then-
make copies of everything and get it to Mr.
Yes.
Florence for you. And, as you're right, but there are, private citizens can put deed restrictions also on property. So that is another option to consider as well. So there's lots of information to share at the meeting. Hopefully we will get there. But I'm assessing that what Madam Chairman is saying is that we'll continue this for 2 weeks and then we'll get information, and then if we deem fit, we'll push it to or vote to send it to the subcommittee. If we
Yes.
don't, then
Right.
good night and good luck. So
So you're
That's fair.
going to provide the clerk with?
anything I have here, I'm going to have copies made and get to Tom tomorrow or the day after at the earliest. And I'll make sure there's 7 copies, or 10 copies probably. Any other questions of us, folks?
I think we're good. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Have a good night, everyone. See you in a couple of weeks. 6 o'clock again, Tom?
And so that brings us to our final item, which is summary action items for the next meeting. We just gave ourselves our own marching orders to prep for this particular topic. What else on here needs doing?
We were gonna look for an alternate for the highway project, removing it from capital. and
Yes,
looking at-
Sarah, Denise will
I've got
get with
that.
Sarah on that.
And the information on CPC?
Pardon me?
Information on CPC?
CPC, okay. Fair enough. That said, we have no public hearings, we have nothing listed for executive session.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Get the words out of my mouth, so don't look at that clock. We have a motion to adjourn at 9:10 PM. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I'm glad you got away from